Shannon. Welcome, everybody. We're live. Hello. Yeah, I need to lift the restriction on chat there. Welcome to another stream. We are going to be playing, we're not going to be playing anything. We're going to be reading The Two Towers. I'm about to work on getting the word out here that I'm live. I just have to, here we are, get the URL. The way that YouTube does things is very, well, I don't want to say it's strange, but it's not what I'm used to. Okay, there we go. Let me go ahead and get the word out. Okay, there we go. Let's make sure all those links go out. Oh, there's a typo in there. I'm gonna fix that now. Not a big deal. Hey Chewy, how goes it? Welcome on in. All right, there we go. Okay. I keep looking over here because I'm just admiring and loving the Hey Coyote, admiring and loving the desktop bookshelf that I got. And if you guys haven't seen it, I could angle the camera to point at it, but quick way is to just go to my community tab. I just posted a picture there. And I have all the books, you know, not every Tolkien book, but most of the Tolkien books are there. The History of Middle-earth is not there. I have to, that's going to be a whole thing. I have to put together like a second one and everything, but I'm not sure where I'm going to put it. That's the issue. I don't know where it's going to go. I have a lot of space, but a lot of it is already taken by a lot of different things. And my assumption was that I was going to have one down here and one up here, right? But it doesn't fit down there, so. And the other one's identical. I ordered two of them. I saw them for $17 and I couldn't resist. Beautiful bookcase. It's going very well for me, actually. I'm a little tired, but other than that, we're doing great. I'm tired because the night before well, for anybody who doesn't know, I am an insomniac. I don't sleep all that well. And sometimes I could go days without a good night's sleep, and that's what happened. And not last night, but the night before was really rough because I was really trying very hard to get some rest, and I was pretty much up all night. And then, so all through yesterday, I was like a zombie, you know. And then I crashed, you know, it was like 10 p.m. I just completely crashed out. Woke up this morning around 10 a.m., so I slept like pretty much just straight through for 12 hours, which was wonderful. But the unique thing about the human experience is, and sleep debt is that you don't really get caught up that easily, so I'm still not right. But, hey, you know, here's to having at least one good night's sleep. I've been thinking about this. So I could just casually just reach over and grab the Two Towers without even really looking. And there it is, the Two Towers. So I have The Hobbit, The Fellowship. I just took out the Two Towers. Hey, Teppo, how's it going? Return of the King. You know what? I know I said here, let me put this back. I know I said I just posted a picture of it, but let me show you guys so you can actually see and know which books are in there. And I'll swing the camera over. Actually, I'll go over to let's see. We'll go over here where I have Doriath in the background, and we'll swing the camera over. So this is the desktop bookcase that I got. You could see it's at a nice 45-degree angle, and all the Tolkien books are, just right within, hey Walter, right within reach and very organized. So you see, here's The Hobbit. This is The Lord of the Rings right here, Unfinished Tales, Silmarillion. This is actually the Ring of Words. I have the Tolkien reader there, which has like the Adventures of Tom Bombadil and all that. Here's the Great Tales: Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, Fall of Gondolin, Fall of Numenor. Beowulf's here, and this little one is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and then the big one there is the Atlas of Middle-earth. I see a bunch of people in the chat saying hi, so hi to everybody. Let's get that fixed. And that's not quite right now, is it? Just have to. All right, there we go. And we'll come back over to here. Yeah, it's looking good, isn't it? Hey, Joe, how's it going? You're going to personally thank me on my videos. You have very bad insomnia. Oh, so do I. You just became a father. That's interesting. Congratulations there. And of course, that's, oh God, that makes it even worse. So they help you drift off peacefully. I've had so many people throughout the years, whether it's a Tolkien or whatever it is that I'm putting, because this isn't my first YouTube channel, but it's the one I'm putting everything into right now. But they've always told me, oh, your voice will put me to sleep, and oh, I hope you don't take that the wrong way. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I know you mean it well. Yeah, the thing about doing that, Teppo, is unfortunately you don't tend to you'll sleep, but the psychological aspect of it can be rough, because you won't have peaceful dreams, which is actually a big part of the psychological reason why we sleep. You need Olorin to come and give you sweet dreams and peaceful wisdom. But congratulations on becoming a father, Joe. Hey there, Time Lord Boy. Hey, Hobbit people. Oh, so we have two people here. Time Lord Boy and also Coyote left me comments, well, actually questions for Quora, not for Quora, for video on my community tab. And let me explain this, because it's a little strange, at least in my estimation. I think it's strange. I was in the YouTube studio, and I noticed that there was sort of a feature there that I didn't have enabled that lets people post to my community tab. And I'm sorry to hear that, Teppo. I'm hoping that you're at least functioning well. And I thought this is a great way, because some people don't want to deal with Quora. Quora is a great website, but some people are like, I've gotten comments about this all the time. I couldn't figure out how to make an account, or I couldn't figure out how to make sure you saw the question. So I thought, maybe we could just, enable this and let people comment on it, right? And I found that I didn't know how it works. So a few people that are in here, Chewy and... was it Chewy? No, I think it was actually Coyote and Time Lord Boy left me questions there, and they are answered in a video, which is already up if you're a member. If you're not a member, you'll see it next Wednesday. But what's really interesting about it, though, is I wanted to make like a little video showing how it works, and then embed it into my intro so that people could see how to leave a question, because I always say you could leave a question right in the comments, but if you want to be featured in a video, you go to Quora. But this is another way that people can do a question separate from the comment section to be featured in a video. And it worked with the two questions that I saw there. I was able to answer them. And I actually wrote the answers on Quora and then, brought it back over. But anyway, what's really weird is I logged into my other YouTube account, and I went to the community thing, and I didn't see how to add a post. And I'm like, well, where is it? So I go back to this account. I see that I have it enabled. I can see that people have posted there. I switch back to my other account. Still can't see it. Can't figure. And I was actually gonna contact one of you guys, Time Lord Boy or Coyote, and say, hey, how did you do it? Because I tried to Google it and there was no help there. Everything on the internet about that feature is, how do I turn this off? This is, I don't want this, which is weird because you have to enable it. But anyway, I found out that it only works on the mobile app. So that's not great. So I did record a little snippet of a video that you'll see in the intro to episode 119 that shows the mobile app and shows how to leave a comment, how to leave a question there. So for anybody that wants to send a question to that they want to be featured in an episode or the Q&A episodes and doesn't want to deal with Quora, that'll show you how to do it. That's one way to do it. Just trying to make it where people are comfortable. That's all that really matters, right? So Tempo, maybe what I ought to do for you is put you in touch with Sid. Because Sid, aside from being a Tolkien scholar, is actually somewhat accomplished as a sort of a New Age healer. And, maybe he could help you with like some meditation or, something that might help you get that restful sleep that you need. I'm sure that he would be willing to at the least meet with you and, give you like a consultation or something. I'll have to, next time I talk to Sid, I'll have to, if you're interested, I'll say, hey, I know a guy who has insomnia. Maybe you can help. You're on phone only with no Wi-Fi. Okay. Yeah, I just noticed that when I look at the channel on my phone, I'm able to see that button. And when I'm on the browser, I'm not able to see it. Yeah, sleep is important. Sleep is important, not only for physical health, but for mental health. So that's why yesterday I was such a mess because I hadn't slept. Yesterday I was streaming on my Twitch channel a video game called Deltarune, and by the end of the stream, it's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was starting to feel like the Walking Dead, like. You ever see one of those zombie movies or You slept in today? Oh, hey, Wayne. Well, that's good to hear. At least you got some rest, right? I woke up. Well, I woke up pretty sharply at 10 a.m., but like I said, I'd actually gone to sleep at or at least went to bed at 10 p.m. I don't know when I fell asleep. I just know that I fell asleep. And that's the thing. If you have insomnia and you know this, you never go to sleep. You just fall asleep. When it happens, it happens. You kind of hope for it to happen. It doesn't always happen. Of course, there's a lot of different types of insomnia. So today is the Two Towers. Where did we leave off? What was it? Treebeard, right? I remember a lot of you guys were very, very kind regarding my Treebeard voice, which was very fun to do. I enjoy being Treebeard. Treebeard, of course, interesting character based on C.S. Lewis to a certain extent. You're a publishing researcher, not really into meditation or any of that. Here's my thought on that. If it's been decades and you've tried everything, try what you haven't tried. You know what I mean? That's what I would. That's my advice for you. Try what you haven't tried. I need to have the Twitch chat in a different place, I think. Yeah, you know what? I guess it's good there. But anyway, your sleep is broken by a couple phone calls. Nothing major. Well, At least you got some sleep, right? I got some sleep last night too, but I'm still not quite right there. Yes, I remember. This is where we... So it's interesting that the last time that I streamed the Two Towers, it was Thursday the 3rd. Booze works. Hey, if it works, it works. But I hope your liver's okay. I wish your liver longevity. And I don't know if the microphone picked this up. If anybody was here for the tail end of my stream on Thursday the 3rd of July, hey Mogul, at the end, there was fireworks going because, it was right before the 4th of July, and my neighborhood, they just can't wait to make things explode. It's the devilry of Sauron out there. And it was just constantly pop, 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 pop as I'm trying to read, all this tree bureau stuff. I don't know if the microphone picked it up, though. Yeah. Do not be hasty. When I saw the Peter Jackson film, The Two Towers, I was very interested because I went in knowing that John Rhys-Davies was going to play Treebeard, and it's interesting because he was already Gimli, and I was wondering, is Treebeard going to sound like Gimli? And there's a few lines where I was like, okay, a little bit of it came through there, but thankfully he was mostly doing a more unique voice for Treebeard. Explodey season is done. I don't know. They're still blowing stuff up on the weekends here. You have to remember, I'm very, very, very in the country, so people buy a whole lot of fireworks, and it's like Thanksgiving dinner. You have leftovers for quite some time. It's like that. They should not. They should not meddle with fire in the woods. There are many trees here. I do live in the woods, so, If you go outside my house, it's like, okay, trees, house, trees. That's what it's like. Which is not a bad thing by any means, but having been somebody who grew up in New York City, it's a little like, man... Yes, it's quieter and it's more peaceful and the air is better and there's just so many positives. But every once in a while, I'm like, man, I wish I could just jet down to the corner store and get a sandwich, at a deli like I did in New York City. That's not a thing here. If I want to go to a deli, it's a 20-minute drive. And then they're not open at night. So anyway, guys, let's get this party started. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill the music here, and we're gonna come over to here. This is the correct one, okay? So, yeah, my copy is not that different from that one. It's a different color, really, and it has the Tolkien signature up here. But. And of course up here it says being the second part of The Lord of the Rings. But it's actually not that different. You could see down here it does say revised edition. And people are like, well, everybody knows what was revised in The Hobbit, right? What was revised in The Hobbit? Everybody sort of knows that story, that it was mostly riddles in the dark. There were a few other things throughout the book, but it was mostly riddles in the dark. They changed the whole thing. Basically, the whole chapter is completely different. Everything to do with Gollum is different. But in The Lord of the Rings, people, well, what did they change? Were there big changes like that? Really, it was mostly typos. Typos, little errors, things like that. Now, I don't know. Some of you I know follow along with your own books. Some of you do not. But this one was published in, I want to say 1978. Where does it say it? See, now, I think we went through this last time, where I tried to find where it was published, and it took me a little while to find that, unfortunately. But I'm going to look again and see if I can find... Oh, it's on the back. 1978, I was right. So this is not exactly a new copy of The Two Towers, and there are actually some errors in here. One of the biggest ones I think I brought it up. I said, hey, does anybody else have the same typo? And nobody else did, Yeah. Got sold. Oh, dear. Well, The Lord of the Rings is always an easy book to get, It's always in print, But we have our, this is, like I said, this is my childhood copy. The same for The Hobbit and the other two books in The Lord of the Rings. And I kind of want to get newer ones just so they look prettier up there and I can, kind of preserve these ones better. We have an attachment to the old books that we grew up with. I mean, they have a certain feel. They have a certain smell. They it's nostalgia, right? They framed the map. That's kind of cool. I have a map here that I was thinking I have to do something with this, right? Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Unfold this. Let me unfurl my map here. Now see. I don't know if I'd frame it or what, but I have this map of Beleriand here. I actually have two of them. This one's the one that's a little rougher, and then the other one has bolder lines. But, they came with my newer copy of the Silmarillion, And my old copy of the Silmarillion is right here. Let me show you this. Look at this old ratty paperback. I got this in a used bookstore in upstate New York for like $1, I think. When was this published? Let's see if it says. This one's got to be really old, right? Well, that's the copyright. 1979. So this is actually the first paperback then. Huh. Look at that. I didn't even know that. It's in rough shape, though. But, that's the great thing about Tolkien books is that they're always in print. You could always just, buy them on Amazon or whatever. But sometimes you have a certain connection to specific ones that you grew up with or you just like the way they look or whatever, I remember for the longest time, a lot of them had, the movie actors on the covers and there was also this one really big 1-volume set that I got from my mother for I guess her birthday it must have been, and she never read it. I mean, she's read The Lord of the Rings, but she never read. She told me she wanted a version of The Lord of the Rings that was one big book, and I got it for her, and then she never read it. I think it's probably up there somewhere. Actually, I think I kept it up there for her because she didn't want it to be somewhere where it would collect dust. Anyway, just to catch you guys up on the Two Towers, so we left off right with the Treebeard chapter, which follows Merry and Pippin. So Merry and Pippin went into the old forest, and they met Treebeard, and then they met all of the Ents. Entmoot happened, and they all started marching towards Isengard. And then we're going to back up for the 5th chapter, and we're going to go back to Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas for chapter 5, The White Rider. Where's my water? Okay. "My very bones are chilled," said Gimli, flapping his arms and stamping his feet. Day had come at last. At dawn the companions had made such breakfast as they could. Now in the growing light they were getting ready to search the ground again for signs of the hobbits. "And do not forget that old man," said Gimli. "I should be happier if I could see the print of a boot." "Why would that make you happy?" said Legolas. "Because an old man with feet that leave marks might be no more than he seemed," answered the dwarf. "Maybe," said the elf, "but a heavy boot might leave no print here. The grass is deep and springy." "That would not baffle a ranger," said Gimli. "A bent blade is enough for Aragorn to read. But I do not expect him to find any traces. It was an evil phantom of Saruman that we saw last night, I am sure of it, even under the light of morning. His eyes are looking out at us from Fangorn even now, maybe." "It is likely enough," said Aragorn. "Yet I am not sure. I am thinking of the horses. You said last night, Gimli, that they were scared away, but I do not think so. Did you hear them, Legolas? Did they not sound to you like beasts in terror?" "No," said Legolas. "I heard them clearly, but for the darkness and our own fear I should have guessed that they were beasts wild with some sudden gladness. They spoke as horses will when they meet a friend that they have long missed." "So I thought," said Aragorn. But I cannot read the riddle unless they return. Come, the light is growing fast. Let us look first and guess later. We should begin here, near to our own camping ground, searching carefully all about, and working up the slope toward the forest. To find the hobbits is our errand, whatever we may think of our visitor in the night. If they escaped by some chance, then they must have hidden in the trees, or that would have been seen. If we find nothing between here and the eaves of the wood, then we will make a last search upon the battlefield and among the ashes. But there is little hope there. The horsemen of Rohan did their work too well. So, the interesting thing that I wanted to point out here is I just really like the dialogue specifically from Gimli here, when he really does sing the praises of Aragorn. Now, I mentioned that when we meet some of these characters, they're barely characters at all at first. And I'm talking about Gimli and Legolas and Boromir. And there are moments where they start to become characters. And it's interesting that all three of them start becoming characters a little bit more specifically after Lothlorien. And that's when we first see that the hobbits are sort of looking at Boromir in a different way, that he's starting to act funny. That's when we see Gimli and Legolas becoming friends. And they start coming out of their shells, and they start having more lines and talking more. And I think it's interesting because if we think of the makeup of the party and we think of who's telling the story, in universe, which is the hobbits, right? It is the tale of the hobbits. So they know each other, right? They're all friends and cousins and stuff like that. They know Gandalf, and they've been traveling with Aragorn at this point where they know him pretty well. So here comes these new guys that they seem nice enough, they seem friendly enough. Gimli is related to an old friend of Bilbo's. Thranduil as well. Legolas is related to an old friend of Bilbo's. Boromir is there, So it kind of takes them a while to really sort of, I think, form an opinion of their new companions. And now what we're seeing is a chapter, not the first one, but a chapter here that has no hobbits. And if you notice, the structure of the Two Towers is really interesting, because it has essentially, in Book 3 at least, which is the first half of the Two Towers, there are three focal characters. There's Merry, there's Pippin, and there's Aragorn. And then we see it in The Return of the King as well, where in Book 5, it's Merry or Pippin or Aragorn. It's always following one of them. So what we think about, what happens when Frodo starts writing his book, and there are these parts where there is no hobbit present. And it's interesting that they focused on Aragorn, because I think it's Gimli that mostly told the story. And I think Gimli was the one that became closer with Frodo specifically, and told them all the things that happened between him and Legolas and Aragorn. And we see a little bit here of the way that Gimli looks up to Aragorn and the way that he's sort of puffing him up a bit. Now you might ask, well, why do I think specifically that it's Gimli and not Aragorn or Legolas? And I'll tell you why. It's because of this book, Unfinished Tales. And in Unfinished Tales, there are many, many little sections, and it just happened to open up to the exact right one that I needed, which is pretty amazing. So in the Third Age section, Chapter 3 is called The Quest of Erebor. And this mostly exists to fill in some gaps regarding actually the Hobbit, and to recontextualize certain parts of the Hobbit, specifically the very beginning of it. But when does it actually take place? It actually takes place sometime during Book 6 of The Lord of the Rings, the latter half of The Return of the King. And because it's after the fall of Sauron. But it's sometime after the Field of Cormallen when they had their celebration, but before they moved on to Rohan for Theoden's funeral. So my thought is this is sometime around the wedding. And the characters that are sitting, Gandalf's the one telling the story, and then we have characters that are listening to the story and occasionally interjecting with certain questions or comments. And it's Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin and also Gimli. And I just have this feeling that after it all went down, that Gimli stuck to Frodo, sort of like white on rice, until they went their separate ways. And I think that around this time, when they were convalescing in Gondor, around the wedding and sort of after the wedding and before they moved on to Rohan, they all put their heads together, and this is when Frodo got all the other stories. And I think Gimli was the one telling all the stories there. Oh, hey, Deborah. You didn't miss much. I'm still on the first page here. I just had to talk about Gimli a little bit there. All right, we're on Chapter 5, The White Rider, if you're following along. And hey there, Dizzy. I'm sorry I didn't say hi to you either. But here we go. For some time the companions crawled and groped on the ground. The tree stood mournfully above them, its dry leaves now hanging limp and rattling in the chill easterly wind. Aragorn moved slowly away. He came to the ashes of the watchfire near the river bank, and then began to retrace the ground back toward the knoll where the battle had been fought. Suddenly he stooped and bent low with his face almost in the grass. Then he called to the others. They came running up. "Here at last we find news," said Aragorn. He lifted up a broken leaf for them to see, a large pale leaf of golden hue, now fading and turning brown. "Here is a malorn leaf of Lorien, and there are small crumbs on it, and a few more crumbs in the grass. And see, there are some pieces of cut cord lying nearby." "And here is the knife that cut them," said Gimli. He stooped and drew out of a tusk, into which some heavy foot had trampled it, a short, jagged blade. The haft from which it had been snapped was beside it. "It was an orc weapon," he said, holding it out gingerly and looking with disgust at the carved handle. It had been shaped like a hideous head with squinting eyes and leering mouth. "Well, here is the strangest riddle that we have yet found," exclaimed Legolas. "A bound prisoner escapes both from the orcs and from the surrounding horsemen. He then stops while still in the open and cuts his bonds with an orc knife. But how and why? For if his legs were tied, how did he walk? And if his arms were tied, how did he use the knife? And if neither were tied, why did he cut the cords at all? Being pleased with his skill, he then sat down quietly and ate some whey bread. That at least is enough to show that he was a hobbit without the malorn leaf. After that, I suppose, he turned his arms into wings and flew away, singing into the trees. It should be easy to find him. We need only wings ourselves." Okay, so let me just comment on this. Legolas he's so funny. Like, everything that he says is sort of half joking. And he's like, oh, they must have flown away. If we could just learn how to fly, we'll find them. Now, it's interesting. Gimli finds the knife, and it mentions that a heavy foot had trampled the knife into the mud there, and I believe that was actually one of the horses, because if we remember, then hey Amir, if we remember, the reason, of course, that they were able to get free is that Pippin had already cut his cords, and he was only sort of pretending to be tied up, so he had his hands free really quickly, and then was able to cut Merry's bonds, and then it mentioned that a rider of Rohan came right after Grishnock gets killed with a spear. And then the horse sort of jumps over them, whether by happenstance or whether because the horse knew they were there so they did not get trampled. But it sounds like that horse might have landed on that knife and snapped it, You saw a picture of Gimli? What is that? What is Gimli? All right, let's continue here. "There was sorcery here, right enough," said Gimli. "What is that old man doing? What have you to say, Aragorn, to the reading of Lord Legolas? Can you better it?" "Maybe I could," said Aragorn, smiling. "There are some other signs near at hand that you have not considered. I agree that the prisoner was a hobbit, and must have had either legs or hands freed before he came here. I guess that it was hands, because the riddle then becomes easier, and also because, as I read the marks, he was carried to this point by an orc. Blood was spilled here a few paces away, orc blood. There are deep prints of hoofs all about the spot, and signs that a heavy thing was dragged away. The orc was slain by horsemen. And later his body was hauled to the fire, but the hobbit was not seen. He was not in the open, for it was night, and he still had his elven cloak. He was exhausted and hungry, and it is not to be wondered that at that, when he had cut his bonds with the knife of his fallen enemy, he rested and ate a little before he crept away. But it is a comfort to know that he had some lembas in his pocket, even though he ran away without gear or pack that perhaps is like a hobbit. I say he, though I hope and guess that both Merry and Pippin were here together. There is, however, nothing to show that for certain. And how do you suppose that either of our friends came to have a hand free? Asked Gimli. I do not know how it happened, answered Aragorn. Nor do I know why an orc was carrying them away, not to help them to escape, we may be sure. Nay, rather I think that I now begin to understand a matter that has puzzled me from the beginning. Why, when Boromir had fallen, were the orcs content with the capture of Merry and Pippin? They did not seek out the rest of us, nor attack our camp, but instead they went with all speed towards Isengard. Did they suppose they had captured the ring-bearer and his faithful comrade? I think not. Their masters would not dare to give such plain orders to orcs. Even if they knew so much themselves, they would not speak openly to them about the ring. They are not trusty servants, but I think the orcs had been commanded to capture hobbits alive at all cost. An attempt was made to slip out with the precious prisoners before the battle. Treachery, perhaps, likely with such folk. Some large and bold orc may have been trying to escape with the prize alone for his own ends. There, that is my tale. Others might be devised. But on this we may count in any case. One at least of our friends has escaped. It is our task to find him and help him before we return to Rohan. We must not be daunted by Fangorn, since need drove him into that dark place. Oh, hey, Alice. You like that Gimli is more serious in the books? I mean, all the characters have their own humor, I think. Let me pause here and talk about this. I mean, there are instances where Frodo is funny, Sam's funny, Aragorn's funny, Legolas is funny more often than not, Gimli is funny. They're all funny, you know. Éomer has good funny moments, you know. I recently wrote something on Quora, and I believe I did include it in a video of the parts of The Lord of the Rings that I find to be very amusing. And two of them actually involved Merry, which was interesting. But I do feel, and I don't mean to come down like really, really like hard on the movies, because I did really like the movies, but I did feel that one of the worst depictions in the movies was Gimli, because they made him into too much of like the dancing clown. He became the comic relief, which I understand that films that with such heavy themes and such grandiose designs need comic relief. But I'm against the thought that a specific character has to be the comic relief. We could have comic relief from anybody, you know. So I think they made Gimli into, you know, more of a fool, you know, like he was a little bit closer to something like Ogren from Dragon Age. I like Ogren, you know, but it's not Gimli, you know. And I do miss the sort of like noble sort of warrior poet that he was in the books. I remember somebody asked me characters that we're talking about right now, Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, and I think Gandalf as well, and how they would fare in a sort of hypothetical battle against Fingolfin, an elf from the First Age, one of Galadriel's uncles. And you know, I don't like that sort of question. I really don't. I don't like to sort of like sit and debate this sort of like, who, you know, Batman versus Superman sort of thing, right? Because what is the reason that they would fight? And I decided to approach the question from that angle, and I said, you know, but you know, this isn't a question of whether Fingolfin would win a hypothetical battle with these Third Age characters, but why would he fight them? Like, what is the reason for it? Is there any sort of thing that could happen where Fingolfin would want to attack these guys? And I said, you know, he would see something wonderful in each of them, you know? And I mentioned that, you know, in Aragorn, he would see, you know, a bit of kinship, you know, and same with Legolas. And I said in Gimli, he would see a sort of quiet wisdom. And I got this comment from somebody who said, "Wisdom and Gimli, what are you smoking?" And I was like, "Well, I guess you've only seen the movies where he's sort of a buffoon, but Gimli's very wise. He's very wise, and I think that it's interesting because almost everything that he says is significant and interesting. You know, he doesn't speak that much." And there is a point which happens a little bit later, a little bit after the Battle of Helm's Deep, where Gimli starts to talk a lot more because he gets worked up about something that he's extremely passionate about. And he starts to do, you know, and Alice, you're there in the chat, and you know me, and when people have these sort of hyperfixations, when you get somebody going about their hyperfixations, they can start to chatter. And Alice knows that I can sit here and talk about the Lord of the Rings and just get just go on and on and on and bore everybody to death. And Gimli gets to that point where he starts to hyperfixate and he starts to chatter, and I've always found it very endearing. And another character that finds it very endearing is Legolas, and he says, "I think you've said more in the past 5 minutes than you ever have." And that's really interesting. And yes, of course, Gimli can be very funny. The part where he threatens Éomer with his axe later in The Return of the King, I think that's hilarious. I think that Tolkien's humor is pretty unsubtle. It's pretty obvious when he wants you to think something's funny, but I also think that newer media has conditioned us to not see a joke unless it's pointed out that it's a joke. And that's sad. I think we've lost something along the way. I think that, like, for example, people will read Shakespeare and they'll sit there and they don't realize how funny it is, They don't realize how hilarious Shakespeare was because there's no sort of like musical sting or laugh track or a record scratch or anything like that. So I think we've lost something there. He was like the stern grandfather that you did not try to play. Who, Tolkien? I would love to talk to Simon one day and ask him, "Hey, what was it like when you were a kid? What was he like?" Because I get the feeling that he was the fun grandpa. I mean, this is the guy, when Christopher Tolkien had his 21st birthday, J.R.R. Tolkien sent out these invitations to a big party, and I don't want to, I don't want to paraphrase this, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something like carriages at dusk, wheelbarrows at dawn, wheelbarrows at midnight, hearses at dawn, Yeah, Shakespeare is so... You see, that's the thing. When you study Shakespeare, I think that before you study Shakespeare, you have to appreciate Shakespeare, right? Before nobody should sit there and open a copy of, say, Macbeth. That's a good example, right? And just start analyzing it line by line. Don't do that. Don't get the annotated one where the play is on one side and the other side is everything's explained and broken down. You're going to give yourself a headache and you're not going to enjoy it. Read through the whole thing first. Enjoy the story, enjoy the dialogue, enjoy the snappy banter, and then go back if you're interested and learn all that stuff. Ian McKellen, of course, he played Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, but he's also a very accomplished stage actor. And I was listening to an interview with him where he was talking about specific plays that he was in, like Waiting for Godot, which is one of my favorite plays, by the way. And he said plays are meant to be seen live. They're meant to be heard. You're an audience. It comes from audio. When you read it, you're losing a little something. Now, of course, some people aren't able to go to the theater for this reason or for that reason, or maybe they just don't want to go to the theater and they want to read. And I think it's fine to experience plays in a written form if that's what you prefer. but you can't, teach it like it's a lesson, And I think it happens with Tolkien too, and that's why I like to stop and point out, hey, that was really funny, because yes, I'm the John Sierra Tolkien scholar. I'm here to teach you guys all this stuff, but I also want to appreciate it with you. I want you guys to enjoy it. I want you guys not only to understand the Lord of the Rings, but I want you to enjoy the Lord of the Rings, because it can be very exciting, it can be very funny, it can be very heartwarming, it can be sad. It really hits any emotion that you can think about. There's even parts that might make you feel some sort of disgust or revulsion. Let's continue here before I get too off on a tangent here. Let's see. I do not know what daunts me more, Fangorn, or the thought of the long road through Rohan on foot, said Gimli. Then let us go into the forest, said Aragorn. It was not long before Aragorn found fresh signs. At one point, near the bank of the Entwash, he came upon footprints, hobbit prints, but too light for much to be made of them. Then again, beneath the bole of a great tree on the very edge of the wood, more prints were discovered. The earth was bare and dry, and did not reveal much. One hobbit at least stood here for a while and looked back, and then he turned away into the forest, said Aragorn. Then there we too must go, said Gimli. But I do not like the look of this Fangorn. And we were warned against it. I wish the chase had led anywhere else. I do not think this wood feels evil, whatever tales may say, said Legolas. He stood under the eaves of the forest, stooping forward as if he were listening, and then peering with wide eyes into the shadows. No, it is not evil, or what evil is in it is far away. I catch only the faintest echoes of dark places where the hearts of the trees are black. There is no malice near us, but there is watchfulness and anger. Well, it has no cause to be angry with me, said Gimli. I have done it no harm. That is just as well, said Legolas, but none the less it has harm. There is something happening inside, or going to happen. Do you not feel the tenseness? It takes my breath. I feel the air is stuffy, said the dwarf. The wood is lighter than Mirkwood, but it is old. Very old, said the elf. So old that almost I feel young again, as if I have not felt since I journeyed with you children. It is old and full of memory. I could have been happy here if I had come in days of peace. I dare say you could, snorted Gimli. You are a wood elf anyway. The wells of any kind are strange folk. Yet you comfort me. Where you go, I will go. But keep your bow ready to hand, and I will keep my axe loose in my belt. Not for use on trees, he added hastily, looking up at the tree under which they stood. I do not wish to meet that old man at unawares without an argument ready at hand, that is all. Let us go. All right, let's stop here, and I want to address the chat here. One of the big things you can not put to movies from literacy are pauses, be it minutes or millennia. I think you can, but it takes a skilled hand to do so. Where would have Gimli heard about the Fanghorn? They heard about it in Lothlorien. They were warned about it. Celeborn told them, won't go into it. It's kind of dangerous. And it's interesting is that, I forget whether it was Merry or Pippin. I feel like it was Merry that said it to Treebeard, said, hey, we were told, in Lothlorien not to come here. And Treebeard said, well, if I got to you first, I would have told you not to go there. And it's sort of like this sort of weird sectionality that you see sometimes in Middle-earth, and we saw it as early on as when they first came to Bree, or you know what, even before they came to Bree. Let me back up. Even before they came to Bree, when they came to Crick Hollow, still within the bounds of the Shire, and there was this attitude in Crick Hollow and Buckland, boy, those folk in Hobbiton are weird. And then there's this attitude in Hobbiton, those Buckland guys are weird, And this is not even that far apart. They're both in the West Farthing, you know what I mean? So you see this where everybody sort of thinks everybody else is strange. When they got to Bree, there were hobbits in Bree, and they're like, man, those Shire hobbits are kind of little fugazi, and the Shire hobbits think the same of them. So you see these two old forests with these great histories, dating back to the first age, Lothlorien and Fangorn, and they both sort of think of each other as bad neighborhoods, you know? So there you have it. And it's true, Gimli's not a youngster. He's 162 years old at this point in time, you know? Jalapeno cheddar meatloaf. Oh, dear. If I wasn't so stuffed from dinner, that would have made me hungry. Jalapeno cheddar meatloaf. Boy, that sounds really good. Recently. Okay. But yeah, where was I? Let's see. Oh, so yeah, I wanted to comment on this, you know, Gimli and Legolas sort of like playfully making fun of each other. You know, Gimli says elves are weird. Legolas calls him and Aragorn children. We actually don't know how old Legolas is. Tolkien never ever gave us even an inkling of when Legolas was born. And it's interesting is this seems to be kind of a common thing for Sindar elves. We don't know when Thranduil was born. We don't know when Orpher was born. Even Iluthingol, it's sort of murky. A lot of the Sindar elves are just sort of like... Celeborn has two different possible, not even birth dates, but birth eras, you know, times where he may have been born. Celeborn is very old, but we don't know exactly how old. It's just very common, I think, with Sindar elves. So this is the only hint, like, because he could be a young guy, he could be about 100, you know, which would make him like almost like an elf teenager, you know, or he could be really, really old. I tend to think that he's probably around the same age as, say, Arwen, right? He was probably born in the early Third Age, but we really don't know. I think that that's the case because of this line where he sort of playfully calls them children. I did get a question on Quora once that said, well, isn't that sort of disrespectful to Aragorn? You know, yeah, okay, Aragorn, right now, by the way, at this point, it's not brought up, but it's Aragorn's birthday. So happy birthday to Aragorn II, Elisar Telcontar, future king of Gondor and Arnor. It's his birthday. He actually turns 89 years old on this very day that they're going into Fangorn Forest. So, by the way, the movie got that wrong when he talked to Eowyn and he said he was 88. I was like, no, you just had a birthday. You're 89. But I think it's okay because it slipped his mind. He's got a lot of other things on his mind. But what's interesting, he's 89, which is old for most men. For a Númenórean, he's middle-aged. Gimli, he's also sort of in the prime of his life at 100. I said 162 earlier. That's incorrect. It's 139. Where did I get that 162 from? I don't know. He died at 260. Well, he didn't die at 262. He sailed to the west at 262. So that's probably Moogle. Happy birthday! Happy birthday to Aragorn, right? In the book, it's not his birthday like July 24th. I think it's March 1st is his birthday. How long? Oh, Moogle. Excellent question. How long do orcs live? We don't know. We know that at the time of the Hobbit, the main sort of goblin in the Battle of Five Armies, Bolg, he was at least 109. So, you know, people say, isn't that disrespectful? Like, it's like he's just joking, though. Legolas is not being like really disrespectful. They're friends. And if you're ever hanging out with friends, even in stressful situations, you rib each other, right? It's just a normal, natural thing that they do. And, you know, we see it all the time. Legolas says, you know, you guys are weird because you're smoking, and smoking is weird. And they say, hey, you tree boys are weird. I wrote something just today, actually, about Moria. And I said, you know, Moria was what the elves called it, and it means the transliteration that a lot of people go with is black pit. It could mean a few different things, but people say, well, isn't that kind of a nasty thing to call the greatest dwarven civilization of all time? I was like, yeah, but it wasn't meant in that way. You know, it was just sort of a funny thing between Celebrimbor and Narvi because they were friends, and friends rib each other, and Celebrimbor and Narvi were the ones that made the Doors of Durin. And the dwarves say Moria all the time. You know, Gloin even says, our fathers called it Khazad-dûm, but now it's Moria. Now, so, I mean, and I said that, you know what? The dwarves have their own language. It's mostly a secret language. You don't really know that many Khuzdul words. They probably have names for all the elf dwellings that mean crazy things like tree bordello or whatever, you know, and they probably giggle about it, you know. It's not that bad, you know. Let's continue onwards here. I just really wanted to say tree bordello. With that, the three hunters plunged into the forest of Fangorn. Legolas and Gimli left the tracking to Aragorn. There was little for him to see. The floor of the forest was dry and covered with a drift of leaves, but guessing that fugitives would stay near the water, he returned often to the banks of the stream. So it was that he came upon the place where Merry and Pippin had drunk and bathed their feet. There, plain for all to see, were footprints of two hobbits, one somewhat smaller than the other. "This is good tidings," said Aragorn. "Yet the marks are 2 days old, and it seems at this point that the hobbits left the waterside." "And what shall we do now?" said Gimli. "We cannot pursue them through the whole fastness of Fangorn. We have come ill-supplied. If we do not find them soon, we shall be of no use to them except to sit down beside them and show our friendship by starving together." "If that is indeed all we can do, then we must do that," said Aragorn. "Let us go out." Oh, actually, let me back up here for a moment. I wanted to point out, too, something that Gimli said. "I will keep my axe loose in my belt," and then he realizes where he is, and he says, "Oh, not to use on trees." But the specific thing that he said that I want to highlight here is, "I do not wish to meet that old man at unawares without an argument ready to hand." So he is already at one point referred to his axe as a teaching implement, or rather Éomer said, "I have never been taught by the axe of an orc." And this is going to come back later. It's sort of a running gag. See, Tolkien even had running gags that would crop up from time to time. Oh, you've been to the Tree Bordello. Okay. All right. They came at length to the steep, abrupt end of Treebeard's Hill, and looked up at the rock wall with its rough steps leading to the high shelf. Gleams of sun were striking through the hurried clouds, and the forest now looked less grey and drear. "Let us go up and look about us," said Legolas. "I still feel my breath short. I should like to taste a freer air for a while." The companions climbed up. Aragorn came last, moving slowly. He was scanning the steps and ledges closely. "I am almost sure that the hobbits have been up here," he said, "but there are other marks, very strange marks, which I do not understand. I wonder if we could see anything from this ledge, which will help us to guess which way they went next." He stood up and looked about, but he saw nothing that was of any use. The shelf faced southward and eastward, but only on the east was the view open. There he could see the heads of the trees descending in rank towards the plain from which they had come. "We have journeyed a long way round," said Legolas. "We could have come all here safe together if we had left the great river on the second or third day and struck west. Few can foresee whither their road will lead them, till they come to its end." "But we did not wish to come to Fangorn," said Gimli. "Yet here we are, and nicely caught in the net," said Legolas. "Look." "Look at what?" said Gimli. "There in the trees." "Where? I have not elf eyes." "Hush! Speak more softly. Look," said Legolas, pointing. "Down in the wood, back in the way that we have just come. It is he. Cannot you see him, passing from tree to tree?" I see now," hissed Gimli. "Look, Aragorn, did I not warn you? There is the old man, all in dirty grey rags. That is why I could not see him at first." Aragorn looked and beheld a bent figure, moving slowly. It was not far away. It looked like an old beggar man, walking warily, leaning on a rough staff. His head was bowed, and he did not look toward them. In other lands they would have greeted him with kind words, but now they stood silent, each feeling a strange expectancy. Something was approaching that held a hidden power, or menace. Gimli gazed with wide eyes for a while, as step by step the figure drew nearer. Then suddenly, unable to contain himself longer, he burst out, "Your bow, Legolas, bend it! Get ready! It's a Saruman! Do not let him speak, or put a spell upon us! Shoot first!" I just need a bit of water. Legolas took his bow and bent it, slowly, and as if some other will resisted him. He held an arrow loosely in his hand, but did not fit it into the string. Aragorn stood silent. His face was watchful and intent. "Why are you waiting? What is the matter with you?" said Gimli in a hissing whisper. "Legolas is right," said Aragorn quietly. We may not shoot an old man so at unawares and unchallenged, whatever fear or doubt is among us. Watch and wait. At that moment the old man quickened his pace, and came with surprising speed to the foot of the rock wall. Then suddenly he looked up, while they stood motionless looking down. There was no sound. They could not see his face, he was hooded, and above the hood he wore a wide-brimmed hat, so that all his features were overshadowed, except for the end of his nose and his grey beard. Yet it seemed to Aragorn that he caught the gleam of eyes keen and bright from within the shadow of the hooded brows. At last the old man broke the silence. "Well met indeed, my friends," he said in a soft voice. "I wish to speak to you. Will you come down, or shall I come up?" Without waiting for an answer, he began to climb. "No," said Gimli. "Stop him, Legolas." "Did I not say I wish to speak to you?" said the old man. "Put that bow away, Master Elf." The bow and arrow fell from Legolas's hands, and his arms hung loose at his sides. "And you, Master Dwarf, pray take your hand from your axe haft till I am up. You will not need such arguments." Gimli started, then stood still as stone, staring, while the old man sprang up the rough steps as nimbly as a goat. All weariness seemed to have left him. As he stepped up to the shelf, there was a gleam, too brief for a certainty, a quick glint of white, as if some garment shrouded by the grey rags had been for an instant revealed. The intake of Gimli's breath could be heard as a loud hiss in the silence. So let me just point out just a couple of three things here. One thing that I want to point out is spoiler alert, it's Gandalf, right? I think we all know that. We've all read the book. We've all seen the movie, right? He says, "You will not need such arguments." And that tells me that he already heard what they said earlier. Notice that earlier I had pointed it out that Gimli had said that he does not want to meet the old man without an argument handy, referring to his axe. And here is Gandalf saying, "You will not need such arguments." The other thing is he's already sort of using the new power that he has. The power of the white, the authority. Because he says, "Put away that bow," and Legolas's bow just drops from his hands. It's sort of, and we see this, in greater effect later on when he meets Saruman and he tells him certain things, and then these things happen, such as your staff is broken. Gandalf has a fantastic amount of authority right now in his voice, in the words that he uses. Hey there, War Master, how's it going? So he's saying, "Put your bow away," and then it happens, right? Just like he says to Saruman later, "Your staff is broken," and it breaks. He has this fantastic power that he only lets out in little bursts, because I think that he doesn't want to abuse his power. So let us continue here. "Well met, I say again." "Well met, I say again," said the old man, coming toward them. When he was a few feet away, he stood, stooping over his staff, with his head thrust forward, peering at them from under his hood. "And what may you be doing in these parts? An elf, a man, and a dwarf, all clad in elvish fashion. No doubt there is a tale worth telling behind it all. Such things are not often seen here." "You speak as one that knows Fangorn well," said Aragorn. "Is that so?" "Not well," said the old man. "That would be the study of many lives. But I come here now and again." "Might we know your name, and then hear what it is that you have to say to us?" said Aragorn. "The morning passes, and we have an errand that will not wait." "As for what I wish to say, I have said it. What may you be doing, and what tale can you tell of yourselves? As for my name," he broke off, laughing long and softly. Aragorn felt a shudder run through him at the sound, a strange cold thrill, and yet it was not fear or terror that he felt. Rather, it was like the sudden bite of a keen air, or the slap of a cold rain that wakes an uneasy sleeper. "My name," said the old man again. "Have you not guessed it already? You have heard it before, I think. Yes, you have heard it before, but come now, what of your tale?" The three companions stood silent and made no answer. "There are some who would begin to doubt whether your errand is fit to tell," said the old man. "Happily, I know something of it.
You are tracking the footsteps of 2 young hobbits, I believe. Yes, hobbits. Don't stare as if you've never heard the strange name before. You have, and so have I. Well, they climbed here the day before yesterday, and they met someone they did not expect. Does that comfort you? And now you would like to know where they were taken. Well, maybe I can give you some news about that. But why are we standing? Your errand, you see, is no longer as urgent as you thought. Let us sit down and be more at ease. The old man turned away and went toward a heap of fallen stones and rock at the foot of the cliff behind. Immediately, as if a spell had been removed, the others relaxed and stirred. Gimli's hand went at once to his axe haft. Aragorn drew his sword. Legolas picked up his bow.
So to pause here. He probably could have, as the Grey, just didn't out of a sense of duty or wisdom. I think that there's a certain truth to that, but I also think that we have to understand that his authority is great now. When he died, and he did die, he didn't go to the Undying Lands. He didn't pass to the West, He was plucked from the world. He went outside of time on a path that he won't speak of. And he met Iluvatar, and he was given a greater authority than even the Valar really could have given him. And we see it here that he tells them, hey, cool it, and they immediately just sort of relax. And he even says that Gimli, who felt very tired, suddenly didn't feel tired. And then when he turns away from them, all of a sudden they're reaching for their weapons. The spell is sort of broken for a moment there. So I think he sensed how tense they were, and he was trying to relax them. And he's a little still addled in the mind from the experience that he's had. But I think he also has made an assumption that they realize who he is, and his assumption is incorrect. Because they think he's dead. They don't realize that he can come back from the dead. So he turns his back, lifts the spell, starts walking away, and all of a sudden they spring into action like that. Here we go. Gandalf the green, Magneto pink. The old man took no notice, but stooped and sat himself on a low, flat stone. Then his grey cloak drew apart, and they saw, beyond doubt, that he was clothed beneath all in white. "Saruman!" cried Gimli, springing toward him with his axe in hand. "Speak! Tell us where you've hidden our friends! What have you done with them? Speak, or I will make a dint in your heart that even a wizard will find hard to deal with." The old man was too quick for him. He sprang to his feet and leaped to the top of a large rock. There he stood, grown suddenly tall, towering above them. His hood and grey rags were flung away. His white garments shone. He lifted up his staff, and Gimli's axe leaped from his grasp and fell, ringing to the ground. The sword of Aragorn, still in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. Legolas gave a great shout, and shot an arrow high into the air. It vanished in a flash of flame. "Mithrandir!" he cried. "Mithrandir!" "Well met, I say, to you again, Legolas," said the old man. They all gazed at him. His hair was white as snow in the sunshine, and gleaming white was his robe. The eyes under his deep brows were bright, piercing as the rays of the sun. Power was in his hand. Between wonder, joy, and fear, they stood and found no words to say. At last Aragorn stirred. "Gandalf," he said, "beyond all hope you have returned to us in our need. What veil was over my sight? Gandalf!" Gimli said nothing, but sank to his knees, shading his eyes. "Gandalf," the old man repeated, as if recalling from old memory a long disused word. "Yes, that was the name. I was Gandalf." He stepped down from the rock, and picking up his grey cloak, wrapped it about him. It seemed as if the sun had been shining, but now was hid in cloud again. "Yes, you may still call me Gandalf," he said, and the voice was the voice of their old friend and guide. "Get up, my good Gimli, no blame to you, and no harm done to me. Indeed, my friends, none of you have any weapon that could hurt me. Be merry, we meet again at the turn of the tide. The great storm is coming, but the tide has turned." He laid his hand on Gimli's head, and the dwarf looked up and laughed suddenly. "Gandalf!" he cried. "But you are all in white."
Yes, I am white now, said Gandalf. Indeed, I am Saruman, one might almost say. Saruman as he should have been. But come now, tell me of yourselves. I have passed through fire and deep water since we parted. I have long forgot much that I thought I knew, and learned again much that I had forgotten. I can see many things far off, but many things that are close at hand I cannot see. Tell me of yourselves.
Gandalf the Infrared. You know, there are some people that could actually see those colors, like infrared and ultraviolet. Bees could see them as well, which is interesting. Everybody's vision just sort of works differently, you know? Yeah. I mean, I don't think Tolkien would have done that. But it's fun to think about, like, other colors of wizards that there could be. And I said that the one other character that is very closely associated with those five is Melian, actually. So if we were to say that there was to be a sixth Istari, an extra wizard, I would say Melian is very close to that. But what color would we associate? I would have to think green, right? Melian the Green. Gandalf the Gamma Radiation. Oh dear. You could look at him once. All right. So, yeah. Gandalf's back, and he even tells them a little bit of his tale in this sort of almost very quick Silmarillion-ish sort of way. I've been through fire, I've been through deep water, I forgot things, I remembered things. And that pretty much brings us up to date. It's very undetailed, but that's what he said, you know. He does give a bit of a more detailed account a bit later. But let's continue here. What do you wish to know? Said Aragorn. All that has happened since we parted on the bridge would be a long tale. Will you not first give us news of the hobbits? Did you find them, and are they safe? No, I did not find them, said Gandalf. There was a darkness over the valley of the Emyn Muil, and I did not know of their captivity until the eagle told me. The eagle, said Legolas. I have seen an eagle high and far off. The last time was 3 days ago, above the Emyn Muil. Yes, said Gandalf. That was Gwaihir the Windlord, who rescued me from Orthanc. I set him before me to watch the river and gather tidings. His sight is keen, and he cannot see all that passes under hill and tree. Some things he has seen, and others I have seen myself. The ring has now passed beyond my help, or the help of any of the company that set out from Rivendell. Very nearly it was revealed to the enemy, but it escaped. I had some part in that, for I sat in a high place, and I strove with the dark tower, and the shadow passed. Then I was weary, very weary, and I walked long in dark thought. So what is he referring to here? The ring was almost revealed. Melian the Mauve. Well, that would be very nice to look at, but I always think that the color, would be green for her, because I feel that she's very attuned with nature. She basically lived as a Sindar elf when she was in Middle-earth, you know. So when was the ring almost revealed to the enemy? This is right after Boromir loses his mind. He crashes out real bad, and he starts chasing Frodo around. Frodo puts on the ring, and then he does something that he doesn't even realize he's doing. He sits in the seat of seeing. And the seat of seeing is this, you know, to put it in very simplistic terms, magic throne, you know. It's a seat that you sit in, and it lets you see far. Sort of like a palantir, except not very portable. But sitting in the seat of seeing while wearing the One Ring got Sauron's attention. Now, he didn't know exactly what was going on. He didn't know that the One Ring was right there. He didn't know that Frodo was sitting there. He just knew that something that was worth his attention was there. So his eye, the eye of Sauron, which is an actual thing, there is a literal eye of Sauron. It's not like it was shown in the movies as a burning giant eyeball on top of the tower. It's not always visible, but it does exist. It's within the tower, and sometimes it peeks out, and you can see it as if you see a flame. Sam sees it later in the story. But anyway, because some people, especially on Quora, they get into arguments, and there's a certain sort of school of thought, we'll say, about that the Eye of Sauron is only ever a metaphor. And that's not true. It is not only a metaphor. It is a metaphor, but it is not only a metaphor. It's what we may call a mixed metaphor, where it literally exists, but it is also used as a metaphor when people say the Eye of Sauron. And we will see it, when they're climbing Mount Doom. I will point out Sam seeing the Eye of Sauron. But if we remember, when Frodo was sitting there, he heard a voice in his head saying, "Take off the ring! Take off the ring, you fool!" And he does. That was Gandalf. You like the idea that the elves might be reincarnated Maya. They literally are Maya. Now, Tolkien had some different thoughts on that, Time Lord. They were originally created specifically to be Maya. And that's why he always referred to the great eagles in the earliest writings as the birds of heaven. Because they were Maya that came to be incarnated into not reincarnated, but incarnated into the form of these great birds. And then later on, he changed his mind. And he decided that they were just really big birds that could speak. But then he changed his mind again. So his most ordered thinking on elves and Maiar and how it all works is actually in a book called The Nature of Middle-earth, which just came out a few years ago. Highly recommend it because it's very well organized. It's very well edited. And in that book he straight out says, and this was something that was written in the early 70s, right before he died, that they were Maiar. So, no news on Huan, unfortunately. I don't know if he changed his mind, because Huan was supposed to be a Maiar at first, and then later he changed it, just like the eagles, to being an animal of a greater order. We don't know if he changed his mind back about Huan or not. All right, let's continue here. "Then you know about Frodo," said Gimli. "How do things go with him?" "I cannot say. He was saved from a great peril, but many lie before him still. He resolved to go alone to Mordor, and he set out. That is all I can say." "Not alone," said Legolas. "We think that Sam went with him." "Did he?" said Gandalf, and there was a gleam in his eye and a smile on his face. "Did he indeed? It is news to me, yet it does not surprise me. Good, very good. You lighten my heart. You must tell me more. Now sit by me and tell me the tale of your journey." Yeah, they have a very strong connection to Gandalf, and they both sort of, they're all working for the same guy. They're all sort of serving Manwë in their own way. The companion sat at the ground on these. Let's try that again. The companion sat on the ground at his feet, and Aragorn took up the tale. For a long while Gandalf said nothing, and he asked no questions. His hands were spread upon his knees, and his eyes were closed. At last, when Aragorn spoke of the death of Boromir, and of his last journey upon the great river, the old man sighed. "You have not said all that you know or guess, Aragorn, my friend," he said quietly. "Poor Boromir. I could not see what happened to him. It was a sore trial for such a man, a warrior and a lord of men. Galadriel told me that he was in peril, but he escaped in the end. I am glad. It was not in vain that the young hobbits came with us, if only for Boromir's sake. But that is not the only part they have to play. They were brought to Fangorn, and their coming was like the falling of small stones that starts an avalanche in the mountains. Even as we talk here, I hear the first rumblings. Saruman had best not be caught away from home when the dam bursts." "In one thing you have not changed, dear friend," said Aragorn. "You still speak in riddles." "Not in riddles," said Gandalf, "no. For I was talking aloud to myself, a habit of the old. They choose the wisest person present to speak to. The long explanations needed by the young are wearying." He laughed, but the sound now seemed warm and kindly as a gleam of sunshine. "I am no longer
young, even in the reckoning of men of the ancient house. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Aragorn. All right, let's try that again. I am no longer young, even in the reckoning of men of the ancient houses, said Aragorn. Will you not open your mind more clearly to me? What then shall I say? Said Gandalf, and paused for a while and thought. This, in brief, is how I see things at the moment. If you wish to have a piece of my mind as plain as possible, the enemy, of course, has long known that the ring is abroad, and that it is borne by a hobbit. He knows now the number of our company that set out from Rivendell, and the kind of each of us, but he does not yet perceive our purpose clearly. He supposes that we are all going to Minas Tirith, for that is what he would himself have done in our place, and according to his wisdom, it would be for a heavy stroke against his power. Indeed, he is in great fear, not knowing what mighty one may suddenly appear, wielding the ring and assailing him with war, seeking to cast him down and take his place. That we should wish to cast him down and have no one in his place is not a thought that occurs in his mind. That we should try to destroy the ring itself has not yet entered into his darkest dream, in which no doubt he will see our good fortune and our hope. For imagining war, he has let loose war, believing that he has no time to waste. For he that strikes the first blow, if he strikes it hard enough, may need to strike no more. So the forces that he has long been preparing, he is now setting in motion, sooner than he intended. Wise fool! For if he had used all his power to guard Mordor, so that none could enter, and bent all his guile to the hunting of the ring, then indeed hope would have faded. Neither the ring nor bearer could long have eluded him. But now his eye gazes abroad, rather than near at home, and mostly he looks towards Minas Tirith. Very soon now his strength will fall upon it like a storm. For already he knows that the messengers that he has sent to waylay the company have failed again. They have not found the ring. Neither have they brought away the hobbits as hostages. Had they done even so much as that, it would have been a heavy blow to us, and it might have been fatal. But let us not darken our hearts, by the enemy has failed so far, thanks to Saruman. Then is Saruman not a traitor? Said Gimli. Indeed, yes, said Gandalf, doubly. And is that not strange? Nothing that we have endured of late has seemed so grievous as the treason of Isengard. Even reckoned as a lord and captain, Saruman has grown very strong. He threatens the men of Rohan, and draws off their help from Minas Tirith, even as the main blow is approaching from the east. Yet a treacherous weapon is ever a danger to the hand. Saruman also had a mind to capture the ring for himself, or at least to snare some hobbits for his evil purposes. So between them our enemies have contrived only to bring Merry and Pippin with marvellous speed and in the nick of time to Fangorn, where otherwise they would never have come at all. Also, they have filled themselves with new doubts that disturb their plans. No tidings of the battle will come to Mordor, thanks to the horsemen of Rohan, but the Dark Lord knows that 2 hobbits were taken in the Emyn and borne away toward Isengard against the will of his own servants. He now has Isengard to fear as well as Minas Tirith. If Minas Tirith falls, it will go ill with Saruman. It is a pity that our friends lie in between, said Gimli. If no land divided Isengard and Mordor, they could fight while we watched and waited. The victor would emerge stronger than either, and free from doubt, said Gandalf. But Isengard cannot fight Mordor unless Saruman first obtains the ring. That he will never do now. He does not yet know his peril. There is much that he does not know. He was so eager to lay his hands on his prey that he could not wait at home, and he came forth to meet and to spy on his messengers. But he came too late, for once, and the battle was over and beyond his help before he reached these parts. He did not remain here long. I look into his mind, and I see his doubt. He has no woodcraft. He believes that the horsemen slew and burned all upon the field of battle, but he does not know whether the orcs were bringing any prisoners or not. And he does not know of the quarrel between his servants and the orcs of Mordor, nor does he know of the winged messenger. The winged messenger, cried Legolas. I shot at him with the bow of Galadriel above Sarn Gebir, and I felled him from the sky. He filled us all with fear. What new terror is this? "One that you cannot slay with arrows," said Gandalf. "You only slew his steed. It was a good deed. But the rider was soon horsed again, for he was a Nazgul, one of the 9 who ride now upon winged steeds. Soon their terror will overshadow the last armies of our friends, cutting off the sun. But they have not yet been allowed to cross the river, and Saruman does not know of the new shape in which the ring-wraiths have been clad. His thought is ever on the ring. Was it present in the battle? Was it found? What if Theoden, Lord of the Mark, should come by it and learn of its power? That is the danger that he sees, and he has fled back to Isengard to double and treble his assault on Rohan. And all the time there is another danger close at hand which he does not see. Busy with his fiery thoughts, he has forgotten Treebeard."
Imagine the one Istar who got assigned the baby vomit orange and just decided to live as a shoe salesman.
Ah, yes.
Bundy the Orange. All right. I left it all behind to be a simple Athelis farmer. I'm loving the references in the chat. So, just to mention that Gandalf, he said a lot there. One of the lines that he said was actually Tolkien's idea for the title of Book 3. Now, of course, the Lord of the Rings is often thought of as 3 books. And here I have it as 3 books. Here's the Fellowship, here's Two Towers, over here is the Return of the King. 3 books, right? But he never thought of it that way. He thought of it as one work. One big 1,200-page novel. And when he was told by his publisher, "Hey, we're going to have to break this up," and he says, "Well, that's fine, because I have it sort of broken up into 6 parts, so you could publish it as 6 different things if you'd like." But they said, "Well, how about we do it as 3?" So then it would be, books 1 and 2, books 2 and 3, and books 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and books 5 and 6. And Tolkien had all sorts of different titles that he had come up with, and he didn't actually like a lot of the titles that were actually used because he didn't come up with them. He didn't come up with The Return of the King, for example. He felt that it was a little too spoilery, and he really didn't like the Two Towers. Now, we talked about this when we finished The Fellowship of the Ring, that he didn't like the title The Two Towers because he himself was puzzled at what 2 towers that referred to, and he came up with an explanation, which we read, that's at the very end of the Fellowship of the Ring, where it says that it's talking about Isengard and Minas Morgul. However, it also says that Minas Morgul hides the secret entrance to Mordor, which is not actually completely true. It's nearby, but that would be a different tower. That would be Cirith Ungol, and that might be a remnant of an earlier draft, or whatever, but the fact is that there's so many towers, that are important in the story, that to call it the Two Towers was sort of silly, and he was not a big fan of that. But the Treason of Isengard was his idea for Book 3. A lot of his titles, I understand why the publisher didn't go with them, because a lot of it was like The Ring Goes South, The Ring Goes East, like that, and some of them wound up as chapter titles. But I always thought The Treason of Isengard, which is, as we see, a titular line here when Gandalf said it, is a really excellent title, because you think you know what it means going in, and then you find out there's another meaning to it. Because if you were reading the book and it was called The Treason of Isengard, and you had already read The Fellowship of the Ring, you're thinking, well, that's easy. Isengard is where Saruman is, and Saruman is a traitor. But here we're learning that he's not just a traitor to Manwë, to the wizards, to the council. He's a traitor to Sauron as well. He really is working for nobody other than himself. And what Gimli said is, it's a shame that between Isengard and Mordor, there's Gondor. If they were next to each other, we could just let them have at it. But of course, Gandalf says that would be bad because, then whoever wins, and let's be honest, it would be Mordor, would reign supreme. There would be one supreme evil with nothing to sort of split their attention. So it's actually good that Gondor is between them. So let's continue here. Oh, I already read that part. Where are we? The Winged Messenger. Here we go. Okay. Oh, let me talk about the hey there, Anons. Let me talk about the Winged Messenger, the Nazgul now. So we know that they were, we met the Nazgul in Book 1 as the Black Riders, and we know that Tolkien's original idea of what the Black Riders were was very different. Originally, there weren't any Nazgul in the story. There was only one Black Rider. It was Gandalf, actually, and the hobbits were just sort of assuming that there were multiples, and then it was going to be revealed that was Gandalf. But of course, timelines changed, motivations changed, the story changed, and he came up with the whole idea of the Nazgul. And they were always riding on horses. Now we know that the horses, all but one of them got killed by the flood of the Ford of Bruinen, and only one horse survived. The Witch King takes that horse to the south to Mordor. He gets extra power. He gets sort of juiced up by Sauron. He comes back, rescues all the others. They get new steeds, these winged steeds. And what are they exactly? They're not exactly like a winged horse like Greek mythology. In the film versions, we saw them depicted as almost like dragons. They seem to be these sort of like wyvern-like creatures. However, in Tolkien's notes, he most often referred to them as birds, actually, that they were called Nazgul birds. Sometimes they were... I'll talk about that in a moment, Teppo. That's an interesting question. Birds. He imagined them as these giant, featherless birds with this sort of leathery skin. And somebody actually wrote a letter to him about that saying, you mean like a pterodon? And, and Tolkien said, well, what's interesting is that I wasn't specifically thinking of dinosaurs when I came up with that. But yeah, kind of, So if you could imagine a pterodon or a pterodactyl, that's sort of what they should have really looked like in the films rather than, being these sort of draconian features. Now, elves can get depressed. And the sad thing about it, Teppo, is that depression can actually just straight up kill them. They can actually die from intense sadness or malaise. It's one of the few things that can, just straight up kill them. They don't get sick. They're very hard to injure. They recover from injuries rather magnificently, but of course, you could injure them so much that we'll put it in quotes, they die, they leave their bodies, they go to the west. But what you're actually asking here is, can an elf just sail, go to the west if they're fed up with things? And yeah, they don't need to, obviously we don't have toasters or electricity in this world. I get that you're just making, sort of a metaphor here. They don't kill themselves, is what I'm getting at. They don't do that. They would just be able to just sail to the west and go there. They can get there even though the earth was made round. They have a path that they know of. Círdan will make a ship for them and they can go there freely. They're not going to put themselves through any sort of like painful demise just to get to the west, especially since they have to wait in Mandos until their body is completely gone before they can get a new one. And it doesn't take as long as it would for a normal person, but it's still a matter of years. And then, if Namo, the guardian of Mandos, who the elves usually just call him Mandos, if he feels that they misbehaved, he's going to keep them there for a while until they learn their lesson, essentially. He's going to put them in a big cosmic timeout. So they wouldn't go about it that way. But sometimes elves do die from intense malaise, or sometimes they'll sail to the west. And this is actually what happened to Elrond's wife. Elrond is married to an elf maiden named Celebrian. She's actually the daughter of Galadriel and Celeborn. And he met her in Lothlorien. They fell deeply in love. They had 3 children. And then what happened to her, right? Where is she? she's not around. She's actually in the West. What happened was that she was going over the Redhorn Pass, Carithris. We've talked so much about Carithris on this channel. And she got waylaid and captured by some orcs. They tortured her. They poisoned her. The orcs really don't like elves. And their hatred of the elves is so great that instead of just outright killing them, they're going to make them suffer. They're really going to make them suffer. So her sons, Elladan and Elrohir, came and rescued her. They killed the orcs. They brought her back to Rivendell, and her husband Elrond, the greatest healer in Middle-earth, healed her. But he could only heal the physical maladies. He could not heal the emotional maladies. He could not heal the fact that she had been tortured, and it was a blow to her mental health. She decided she didn't want to be in Middle-earth anymore, and so she sailed to the West. So yes, elves can become depressed, and they can decide to go to a better place, not in the way that you're actually doing that, They wouldn't do that for the reason that I said about Mandos. Because they might get stuck there for a while. Mandos, Namo, he might say, hey, you've done some pretty weird things. I'm going to keep you here until you learn your lesson. And he could do that. He has complete authority over that realm, and nobody could leave without his permission. Even the other Valar, if they visit him, they need his permission to leave. That's why they used it as a prison for Morgoth for a while. But yeah, they would take a boat. It might seem like your idea might be faster, but in the long run, it's a lot slower because they'd have to wait for their body, their remains, and whether it's chopped up in pieces, it doesn't matter. It has to wither away to nothing. And for Namo to give them the okay to leave Mandos and go to be in Valinor or Erisea or Eldamar or whatever country they choose to live in the West. So the thing is, though, is that no matter what, and this is the sad part, Teppo, they're still stuck. They're still stuck because nothing will really kill them, even if they don't get a new body. Like Feanor, for example. Feanor is stuck as a spirit for the rest of the world, until the end. Nothing will really kill them. They'll never be able to leave Arda until Arda's gone. And even, nobody really knows. Even Tolkien never said, what happens to the elves after that? Do they just stop existing? Do they get an afterlife? Are they reunited with mortal men? Now, there was a really great, it's half sort of essay and half story, because it does have dialogue. And I'm forgetting I think it's Morgoth's Ring. Let me just... Let me see, which book is that in? I just want to make sure that I don't tell you the wrong book. Yeah, I was right. It was Morgoth's Ring. I don't know if you have the book Morgoth's Ring, but there's a story in it called The Debate of Finrod and Arathel. And Arathel was a mortal woman, and she was one of they called them the wise women. They were seers, and she had some pretty wild beliefs about death and mortality. And she had gotten it in her head that all living things were created to be immortal, and that it's actually sin that makes them mortal. So she thinks that because some of the very earliest men joined Morgoth, that this was sort of an original sin type situation where it tainted their species and made them mortal. And Finrod is like, well, there have been some elves that have done some really terrible things, and we're still immortal. And they sort of go back and forth, and he very slowly brings her around and changes her mind and makes her realize that, Iluvatar did create them specifically to be mortal. And then she sort of gets a little like, well, that kind of sucks, right? Because that means that when we die, we're separated, you and me. I'm going to die, and then I'm never going to see you again. And Finrod, who I think he was very wise in this situation, he said, actually, death is going to bring us together because one day I'm going to die. It's going to be a long, long time, but one day I'm tied to the world, and one day the world is going to end, and then I'm going to end, and then we're going to be together again. So Finrod at least believed that when the world ends, the elves will go to the afterlife finally, and then they'll finally get their rest that they, So I've often said that there's certain characters that would take a very different trajectory if there was a such thing as therapy in the world of Tolkien's legendarium. Certainly Sauron early on, a little bit of therapy would have helped him a lot. Because I've said that Sauron sort of suffers from what they call obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And if you've heard of OCD, it's, you kind of know what it is. But OCPD is a little bit different in the philosophy that the person sort of develops. As a person who has OCD knows that the strange things that they do, the compulsions that they have, are not natural, that they are the result of poor mental health, and they wish they could stop. But somebody with OCPD thinks everybody else is completely insane. I'm the only person who knows that if I don't close the door 3 times in a row, terrible things will happen, and I can't believe you guys are not doing that. And I know somebody with OCPD, and that's sort of like that person. I don't want to call them out by name, but it's a person I know who, his trait is that in any sort of online communication, he has to end every sentence with a period. Even if it's just a smiley face, like if he's sending you an emote, there's a period after the emote. His username has a dot, a period after it. Everything has to have a period, and he told me once, if I don't do that, bad things happen. And, he has OCPD, and he thinks everybody else is just going out there and not using a period at the end of every message, and it's going to cause something really terrible. Will the end of the world be the famous final battle where Turin slays Morgoth with the Black Blade? So that's something that some elves believe will happen. The question really is, did J.R.R. Tolkien believe that will happen? Because he sort of he abandoned the idea at one point. That was supposed to be the last paragraph of the Silmarillion. It was going to end with that prophecy, the Dagor-Dagorath. And is there help for OCPD? Yes, there is. There's therapy, of course. There's a lot of different therapeutic ways that you could be tackled. And that's why I said Sauron reads like a classic OCPD, and he could have been very benefited from a little bit of therapy. Like if he had these compulsions, if he's saying, everything seems chaotic to me, I have to have order, everybody is so disorderly, and it's driving me crazy, I have to control everything. And if he had gone to Manwë and voiced these concerns, I'm sure he would have gotten help. But he didn't. You have a friend with OCD. It was debilitating for her. Yeah, it is definitely a gradient. OCD can be mild. It can be completely debilitating and rule your whole life, or it can be anywhere in between. OCPD is a little different. Like I said, it's different in the philosophy there because the person is not so aware that what they're doing is strange. They think everybody else is strange. But anyway, not to get too off track, but what I'm saying here is that if an elf gets depressed, and they do get depressed sometimes, it does happen, they really, they need help, but they need to be able to come out of it, because if they don't, it's a long road. Because like I said, nothing will ever really kill them. They will never find that rest. And if they're tired of the world, and they will get tired of the world, and even the Ainur, the Valar, the Maiar, all of them, they get tired eventually too, and they're going to look at the mortal men and think, oh, God, those guys haven't made. Just 80 to 100 years, and then boom, done, right? They haven't made. And that was Tolkien's whole philosophy. Tolkien had really interesting thoughts about death and religion and salvation and everything. And we talk about this a lot on like the Council of Tolkien. And what was really interesting is me and Matt and Sid, we were once asked this question about universal salvation, and we all came to the conclusion that Tolkien believed in it. But yeah. Let's continue here because we got really up. But the end of the world, do we know what will happen? I think the point is that we don't, right? I don't think we're meant to know because Christopher, when he was putting together the Silmarillion, and, what a monumental Herculean task that is. These thousands of pages of notes ranging from 1917 up until 1973, right? A lot of them handwritten, some of them completely illegible. Contradictory, different ideas, rewrites, everything, the whole thing, right? And he had to put together a coherent story from that. And it was going to end with this prophecy of the end of the world, and then he found a note that said, there is no prophecy. So that's why he didn't include it. But there were these sort of widowed and orphaned references where Tolkien had made reference to the final battle, like with Pharazôn and stuff like that. So, my conclusion there is the elves believe it'll happen. Will it actually happen? Who knows, right? No, for a depressed elf, like I said, that wouldn't help. All that's going to do is get them a ticket to... First of all, it's going to hurt like heck. And then it's going to get them a ticket to the caverns of Mandos for quite a while, and they're going to be, sort of alone and in this dark, depressing place. So no, that would not be the best route. Would be for them to go to Valinor and to be with Manwë, because then they're going to have the Valar around to help them with that sort of thing, Because the Valar, they're older than the world, so they know a little bit about immortality and the sort of thoughts that you have over periods of thousands and tens of thousands of years, Plus, I don't think there's wood chippers in Middle-earth. I do have to just point that out. All right, let's continue with the Two Towers now. Now you speak to yourself again, said Aragorn with a smile. Treebeard is not known to me, and I have guessed part of Saruman's double treachery. Yet I do not see in what way the coming of two hobbits to Fangorn is served, save to give us a long and fruitless chase. Wait a minute, cried Gimli. There is another thing I should like to know first. Was it you, Gandalf, or Saruman that we saw last night? You certainly did not see me, answered Gandalf. Therefore I must guess that you saw Saruman. Evidently, we look so much alike that your desire to make an incurable dent in my hat must be excused. Good, good, said Gimli. I am glad that it was not you. Gandalf laughed again. Yes, my good dwarf, he said. It is a comfort not to be mistaken at all points. Do I not know that I am only too well? But of course I never blamed you for your welcome of me. How could I do so, who have so often counselled my friends to suspect even their own hands when dealing with the enemy? Bless you, Gimli, son of Gloin. Maybe you will see us both together one day and judge between us. Now, this is interesting here. Let's talk about the idea of Saruman and Gandalf physically looking very similar. Morgoth, Morgoth needed therapy. I think what Morgoth needed was a reality check. Morgoth needed a reality check. One woman turns him down, and then he's evil for the rest of the time. Like, come on, man, calm down, right? Now, the idea of it, this is sort of laying a foundation for something that we learn about a lot later, that to the, untrained eye, that Saruman and Gandalf look very similar. And Gimli later on in the story says that he really wants to see the confrontation between Gandalf and Saruman, specifically because he wants to see if they really do look so alike. And part of that is his own sort of like, I don't want to use the word pride here because it's not really apt, but he wants to just make sure that he hadn't completely lost his mind, because he mistook Gandalf for Saruman, or mistook Saruman for Gandalf, and he wants to just know, was I really way off base or not? And he says, like and yet unlike. He sees the difference between the two, but he is sort of relieved to see that, yes, they really do look alike. But that's not it. That's not the end of it. Who was this wizard they saw? Well, that was definitely Saruman. It was definitely Saruman. They definitely saw Saruman the night previous. But the idea that they look enough alike that they could be mistaken from each other is actually one of many things. It's not the first thing, but it's one of many things that is laying the foundation for the scouring of the Shire. Now, that's a very misunderstood term. Let me start off with the word scouring, because a lot of people will say, well, what about, when Saruman scoured the Shire? No, Saruman did not scour the Shire. Merry and Pippin and Farmer Cotton and Sam and Frodo, they scoured the Shire. Scouring is to clean something, to cleanse, but not just to wash with, gently with soap and water, but to do it roughly. And what Tolkien is telling us, the scouring of the Shire was cleansing the Shire of an evil that had taken root using violence in a rough sort of manner. And there's a lot of these little things that lay the foundation to it. Sam looking into the mirror of Galadriel. Yes, C.W. Train, exactly. But clean roughly, right? That's what it really means. Sam looking into the mirror of Galadriel, that was like sort of the first, well, not even. It was the second thing. The first thing was Elrond's sort of reluctance to send Merry and Pippin, to include them in the Fellowship of the Ring. He said he was going to send 2 elves in those 2 spots, right? And Merry and Pippin made a big deal out of it. They said that they wanted to go, and that basically that they were going to go. They weren't really going to listen to Elrond, and in the most respectful way that they could, they told him, the only way that you can prevent us from going where Frodo goes would be to lock us up. And Elrond says, well, I guess I got to let you go. And Gandalf had vouched for them, and in the scene that we just read a little while ago, he said, yes, this has served a great purpose. Merry and Pippin have already served a great purpose, and they will continue to serve great purposes. They have a very big part to play in this story. So that was that was to set up the foundation for the Scouring of the Shire, which is really the climax of the Lord of the Rings. It's not the Fall of Sauron, it's the Scouring of the Shire. Because Elrond said that he thinks they could do more good in the Shire, that they should go back and they should keep an eye on the Shire and anything bad that might happen there. Because Elrond is, as many elves are, a very foresighted person, and he has foreseen that there's going to be an issue in the Shire. And then we get Sam seeing a little bit of this in the mirror of Galadriel and saying, hey, maybe Elrond had it right. And now we see this idea that at a distance maybe, or just to the untrained eye, that Gandalf and Saruman could be confused for each other. And then a little bit later, when we catch up with Merry and Pippin at Isengard, what do they find in the storerooms of Isengard when they're looking for food? Not only do they find tobacco, but they find a specific brand of it. Old Toby from the South Farthing of the Shire. Now, how did Saruman get that? So we learn a lot about, later on about what Saruman has been up to. He's already messing with the Shire. And let's go back to the very first chapter of The Lord of the Rings. A long-expected party. Gandalf arrives in the Shire. he meets with Frodo, and he gets sort of this weird sort of reception by other hobbits. Some hobbits are very happy to see him. Hey, it's the guy with the fireworks, right? But as far as I know, nothing really happened to the ring that Saruman had. I mean, I don't think he really did much other than make his robes like a rainbow, you know. Yes, I believe that is the case, Coyote, that they're confusing Scour and Scourge. I absolutely think you're right on that. But anyway, it is mentioned a few times that while Gandalf was once looked on sort of fondly by, you know, the residents of the Shire, he's gotten kind of a bad reputation. And a little bit of this is the fact that when Bilbo disappeared at his birthday party, there was a flash of light. Now, normally when somebody puts on the One Ring, there's no flash of light. And Bilbo asked him about that. He says, I suppose that was your doing. And Gandalf says, I might as well give them a reason, and they could blame me. Now, that's going to be part of it, that Gandalf maybe disappeared old crazy Bilbo, you know. But we learn through, you know, the Lord of the Rings and through Unfinished Tales that Saruman's been to the Shire. He's been there a few times. And when he goes, he doesn't go, you know, openly. He disguises himself as Gandalf. So a lot of these, you know, these hobbits, they see a guy with a blue hat and gray robes, and they think, well, there's that Gandalf guy, you know. And that Saruman, his activities in the Shire has a lot to do with why they're not so fond of Gandalf as they used to be. And this is, like I said, it's all setting up, you know, the end of the story. There's the Scouring of the Shire. That's the real, you know, a lot of people get like kind of thrown off by the Scouring of the Shire because they're thinking the climax already happened and there's like 5 more chapters. What's going on? Sauron's defeated. And okay, we get the wedding, we get a funeral, we get a trip back home, and then that should be it. But what is this? All of a sudden, there's, you know, Saruman and Grima and all this stuff, and it throws some people off. But this is actually the for Tolkien, it's the moment of eucatastrophe. Eucatastrophe is the moment in a fairy story where you get this joy, right? Now, we just experienced one of these, is the return of Gandalf. Gandalf thought to be dead. Suddenly he's alive, and he's more powerful and magnificent than he ever has been. For the readers, that's the eucatastrophe. But for Tolkien, the Scouring of the Shire is his own eucatastrophe. And the reason I say this is because of his own experiences. Now, in a lot of ways, Frodo is like J.R.R. Tolkien himself. Now, this is not an allegory, you know, but he shares some experiences. He went off to war, and then he came back, and his land was changed. Now, Tolkien said it's not exactly right. It's not exactly the same, because he said the ruination of his country started before World War I. And I think that's why he put these little hints that this was sort of all going on. The very first conversation that happens in The Lord of the Rings is between Hamfast Gamgee and the miller's son, Ted Sandyman. And Ted Sandyman, it has a big hand in the ruination of the Shire. You know, he's one of the sheriffs. He's one of the guys that willingly joined Saruman. So he does put that in there to say, hey, it was kind of already happening. Even before the story started, there was a negative sort of element. Because do you think that Saruman could just walk in and take over and they're just going to put up with it? No, there were some hobbits that joined him. They had their own little, you know, their own little cartel of hobbits. Guys like, you know, like Lothar Sackville Baggins. They thought he was the big boss. They didn't even know that Saruman was behind it all, you know? So this whole idea was that it was this sort of hobbit mafia that erupted. And then, you know, these guys didn't just meet Saruman and go, hey, evil sounds pretty good. Yeah, let's do that. They were already messed up. They were already wanting to run things their way, wanting power, because they're you know, a form of mortal men themselves. Hobbits are, you know, not all good people. Look at Gollum. So what we have here is we have, like I said, it's sort of almost a fatal misunderstanding that a lot of people have, is that the real climax of the story is actually the Scouring of the Shire. And this is Tolkien's sort of, this is where we see that it truly is a fantasy story, in his own words, right? It really is a fantasy because you can't do that in real life. You can't just, say, hey, you know what? We're just going to just, run out all the bad people and everything's going to be great again. We're going to make everything back the way it was. We're going to replant the trees and it's all going to be wonderful. And then there's going to be this great harvest and everybody's going to be happy. That's how you know it's fantasy. That's how you know it's not real, because time marches on. Industrialization, the internet, everything that's happened. There are a lot of things in the real world right now that Tolkien would say, this is the devilry of Isengard. Just the fact that there's this company out there called Palantir. Can you imagine how angry he would be about that? It's kind of crazy, especially considering the things that they're up to. It's very un-Tolkienish. So what I'm really saying is this is where I'm talking about we're setting something up that Tolkien wrote specifically to make himself happy. And that's what made him, I think, such an interesting writer, because a lot of writers are putting things in to say, all right, well, this is going to make the reader happy. C.S. Lewis was very, very fond of this. He would put things in to make the readers happy. Tolkien was not a writer by trade. He was an academic. He was a professor. He was a linguist. He was a philologist. He wrote to ease his own mind. He wrote to make himself happy. So, of course, The Lord of the Rings, ends up with the country that is his idealized view of England being revitalized into a form that he likes, that he approves of and that he would like to live in. The authors that I think get the idea of fantasy wrong are the ones that create a world that you wouldn't want to live in. That's what it really comes down to. If you create a fantasy world that people don't want to be in, that they wouldn't want to live there, then you haven't done fantasy. You've just done really what you've done is what they used to call the swords and sorcery sort of thing, right? You've done pulp fiction. If Tolkien sat around the modern world for 5 minutes today, he would wish he was back in his childhood home in the Green Hills. I mean, he already did. Even in his own time, he wished he was back in his childhood home in the Green Hills, And the character, I mentioned Frodo, but the character that, that I think he identifies the most with is actually Sam. Because Sam gets the happy ending, Frodo's troubled at the end of the story. Frodo has all of the marks of, what at the time would have been called battle fatigue or shell shock. These days we call it post-traumatic stress disorder. He has all the marks of someone who has seen too much, been through too much, and he's never going to be the same. Whereas, Merry and Pippin and Sam are a little bit different. Merry and Pippin really took to the idea of being, soldiers. And Sam, he was the one that was able to snap back right into his life, and he was fine. That's what Tolkien really sort of wanted to be, the guy that could just go home from the war, clean up the mess that he saw, and then have 13 kids. So I think that's what Tolkien's wish fulfillment in Sam. All right, let's continue, because I think at this point we've been live for 2 hours and I've only gotten through part of one chapter, but it's what a chapter it is. I mean, the return of Gandalf and all this stuff, and there's so much to talk about, and you guys have brought up such interesting topics in the chat. So let's continue onwards here. Now, where was I? Let's see. Here we are.
But the hobbits, Legolas broke in. We have come far to seek them. And you seem to know where they are. Where are they now? With Treebeard and the Ents, said Gandalf. The Ents! Exclaimed Aragorn. Then there is truth in the old legends about dwellers in the deep forests and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still Ents in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days, if indeed they were ever more than a legend of Rohan. A legend of Rohan, cried Legolas. Nay, every elf in Wilderland has sung songs of old Onodrim and their long sorrow. Yet even among us they are only a memory. If I were to meet one still walking in this world, then indeed I should feel young again. But Treebeard, that is only a rendering of Fangorn into the common speech. Yet you seem to speak of a person. Who is this Treebeard? Ah, now you are asking much, said Gandalf. The little that I know of his long, slow story would make a tale which we have no time for now. Treebeard is Fangorn, the guardian of the forest. He is the oldest of the Ents, the oldest living thing that still walks between the sun upon this middle earth. I hope indeed, Legolas, that you may yet meet him. Merry and Pippin have been fortunate. They met him here, even where we sit, for he came here 2 days ago and bore them away to his dwelling, far off by the roots of the mountains. He often comes here, especially when his mind is uneasy and rumors of the world outside trouble him. I saw him 4 days ago, striding among the trees, and I think he saw me, for he paused. But I did not speak, for I was heavy with thought, and weary after my struggle with the Eye of Mordor. And he did not speak either, nor call my name. Perhaps he also thought that you were Saruman, said Gimli. But you speak of him as if he was a friend. I thought Fangorn was dangerous. Dangerous, cried Gandalf, and so am I. Very dangerous, more dangerous than anything you will ever meet, unless you are brought alive before the seat of the Dark Lord. And Aragorn is dangerous, and Legolas is dangerous. You are beset with dangers, Gimli, son of Gloin, for you are dangerous yourself in your own fashion. Certainly the forest of Fangorn is perilous, not least to those that are too ready with their axes. And Fangorn himself, he is perilous too, yet he is wise and kindly none the less. For now his long, slow wrath is brimming over, and all the forest is filled with it. The coming of the hobbits and the tidings that they have brought have spilled it. It will soon be running like a flood. But its tide is turned against Saruman and the axes of Isengard. A thing is about to happen, which has not happened since the elder days. The Ents are going to wake up and find that they are strong. What will they do? Asked Legolas, in astonishment. I do not know, said Gandalf. I do not think they know themselves. I wonder. He fell silent, his head bowed in thought. Tolkien wanted to leave the world more enchanted than the state he founded it. Absolutely, 100%. That's absolutely his philosophy. Let me talk about, just very briefly here, he says something interesting, and he's talking about the Ents, but it's a little bit of foreshadowing here for what's going to come. He says the Ents are going to wake up and find that they were strong. And what happens after this? You know, we go to the very next chapter, the King of the Golden Hall. What does he say to Theoden? Your hands would remember their strength if they grasped your sword. And we see this, the Two Towers as a story, really the Treason of Isengard, the first half here, book 3, is really about certain characters waking up and finding that they're strong, whether it's the Ents, or whether it's Theoden, or Merry and Pippin themselves. These characters are coming to an awakening. Now, Gandalf said something here that's incorrect. I want to point this out. He said something incorrect, and Gandalf's allowed to be incorrect from time to time. He said that Treebeard is, and I quote, the oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this Middle Earth. Now, that's not true. And I'm going to put it to the chat. There is something that walks Middle Earth that is older than Treebeard. Who knows what it is? Yeah. I think, Walter, the point that Gandalf is making is that danger doesn't necessarily mean bad, because he said, Gimli, you're dangerous. Does that mean I shouldn't be around you? You're told that the forest is dangerous. Yes, the forest is very dangerous. There's danger everywhere. You're dangerous. Aragorn's dangerous. I'm dangerous. I'm really dangerous. Legolas, he's dangerous. Yep, Deborah's correct. It's Bombadil. Bombadil. Now we can make an allowance maybe that Tolkien, that Gandalf is maybe not considering. Tommy B, exactly. All right, you guys all got it. Considering him to be a living thing, perhaps. Maybe that's the case. But absolutely, yeah, he's older than the Ents. Absolutely older than the Ents. So I would say that he's sort of incorrect here. Maybe we can make an allowance. Círdan is not older than the Ents. He's probably the oldest elf still in Middle-earth, at least the oldest one that we know of, unless there's some, really old Avari elf, in a forest somewhere that just, hasn't done anything for the past, 15,000 years. But Círdan is close, but he's about the same age as like Thingol would have been. So not a first generation elf, probably like a third or fourth generation elf, right? So, thank you, Brian. All right, let's continue here. But yeah, I wanted to point out that that's sort of an incorrect thing that Gandalf said. He forgot about Bombadil, or at least he wasn't thinking of Bombadil, or he wasn't considering Bombadil. The others looked at him. A gleam of sun through the fleeting clouds fell on his hands, which lay now upturned on his lap, and they seemed to be filled with light as a cup is with water. At last he looked up and gazed straight at the sun. "The morning is wearing away," he said. "Soon we must go." "Do we go to find our friends and to see Treebeard?" asked Aragorn. "No," said Gandalf. "That is not the road that you must take. I have spoken words of hope, but only of hope. Hope is not victory. War is upon us and all our friends, a war in which only the use of the ring could give us surety of victory. It fills me with great sorrow and fear, for much shall be destroyed and all may be lost. I am Gandalf, Gandalf the White, but black is mightier still." He rose and gazed out eastward, shading his eyes as if he saw things far away that none of them could see. Then he shook his head. "No," he said in a soft voice. "It has gone beyond our reach. Of that at least let us be glad. We can no longer be tempted to use the ring. We must go down to face a peril near despair, and yet that deadly peril is removed." He turned. "Come, Aragorn, son of Arathorn," he said. "Do not regret your choice in the valley of the Emyn-Muil, nor call it a vain pursuit. You chose amid doubts the path that seemed right. The choice was just, and it has been rewarded. For so we have met in time, who otherwise might have met too late. But the quest of your companions is over. Your next journey is marked by your given word. You must go to Edoras and seek out Theoden in his hall, for you are needed. The light of Anduril must now be uncovered for the battle for which it has so long waited. There is war in Rohan, and worse evil. It goes ill with Theoden." "Then are we not to see the merry young hobbits again?" said Legolas. "I did not say so," said Gandalf. "Who knows? Have patience. Go where you must go and hope. To Edoras I go thither also." "It is a long way for a man to walk, young or old," said Aragorn. "I fear the battle will be long over ere I come there." We shall see," said Gandalf. "Will you come now with me?" "Yes, we will set out together," said Aragorn. "But I do not doubt that you will come there before me if you wish." He rose and looked long at Gandalf. The others gazed at him in silence as they stood there facing one another. The grey figure of the man, Aragorn son of Arathorn, was tall and stern as stone. His hand upon the hilt of his sword, he looked as if some king out of the mists of the sea had stepped onto the shores of lesser men. Before him stooped the old figure, white, shining now as if with some light kindled within, bent, laden with years, but holding a power beyond the strength of kings. "Do I not say truly, Gandalf," said Aragorn at last, "that you could go whithersoever you wished quicker than I? And this I also say, you are our captain and our banner. The Dark Lord has 9, but we have 1, mightier than they, the White Rider. He has passed through the fire and the abyss, and they shall fear him. We will go where he leads." "Yes, together we will follow you," said Legolas. "But first it would ease my heart, Gandalf, to hear what befell you in Moria. Will you not tell us, can you not say, to even your friends how you were delivered?" I have stayed already too long, answered Gandalf. Time is short, but if there were a year to spend, I would not tell you all. Then tell us what you will, and time allows, said Gimli. Come, Gandalf, tell us how you fared with the Balrog. Name him not, said Gandalf, and for a moment it seemed that a cloud of pain passed over his face, and he sat silent, looking old as death. Long time I fell, he said at last, slowly, as if thinking back with difficulty. Long I fell, and he fell with me. His fire was about me. I was burned. Then we plunged into deep water, and all was dark. Cold it was, the tide of death almost froze my heart. Deep is the abyss that is spanned by Durin's bridge, and none has measured it, said Gimli. Yet it has a bottom, beyond light and knowledge, said Gandalf. Thither I came at last, to the uttermost foundations of stone. He was with me still. His fire was quenched, but now he was a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. We fought far under the living earth, where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me, and ever I hewed him, till at last he fled into dark tunnels. They were not made by Durin's folk, Gimli, son of Gloin. Far, far beyond the deepest delvings of the dwarves, the world is gnawed by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report to darken the light of day. In that despair my enemy was my only hope, and I pursued him, clutching at his heel. Thus he brought me back, at last, to the secret ways of Khazad-dûm. Too well he knew them all. Ever now we went, until we came to the endless stair. Long has that been lost, said Gimli. Many have said that it was never made save in legend, but others say it was destroyed. It was made, and had it not been destroyed, said Gandalf. From the lowest dungeon to the highest peak it climbed, ascending an unbroken spiral in many thousand steps, until it issued at last in Durin's tower carved in the living rock of Xeroxigil, the pinnacle of the Silvertine. There upon Celebdil was a lonely window in the snow, and before it lay a narrow space, a dizzy eyrie among the mists of the world. The sun shone fiercely there, but all below was wrapped in cloud. Out he sprang, and even as I came behind he burst into new flame. There was none to see, or perhaps an after-ages song would still be sung of the Battle of the Peak. Suddenly Gandalf laughed. But what would they say in the song? Those that looked up from afar thought the mountain was crowned with storm. Thunder they heard, and lightning, they said, smote upon Celebdil, and leaped back broken into tongues of fire. Is that not enough? A great smoke rose about us, vapor and steam. Ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountain side where he smote it in his ruin. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time, and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done, and naked I lay upon the mountain top. The tower behind was crumbled into dust, the window gone. The ruined stair was choked with burned and broken stone. I was alone, forgotten, without escape upon the hard horn of the world. There I lay staring upward, while the stars wheeled over, and each day was as long as a life-age of the earth. Faint to my ears came the gathered rumour of all lands, the springing and the dying, the song and the weeping, and the slow, everlasting groan of overburdened stone. And so at last Gwaihir the Windlord found me again, and he took me up and bore me away. Ever am I fated to be your burden, friend, at need, I said. A burden you have been, he answered, but not so now. Light as a swan's feather in my claw you are. The sun shines through you. Indeed, I do not think you need me any more. Were I to let you fall, you would float upon the wind. Do not let me fall, I gasped, for I felt life in me again. Bear me to Lothlorien. That indeed is the command of the Lady Galadriel, who sent me to look for you, he answered. Thus it was that I came to Caras-Galadon, and found you but lately gone. I tarried there in the ageless time of that land, where days bring health, healing, not decay. Healing I found, and I was clothed in white. Counsel I gave, and counsel took. Thence by strange roads I came, and messages I bring to some of you. To Aragorn I was bidden to say this. Where now are the Dunedain, Elisar, Elisar? Why do thy kinsfolk wander afar? Near is the hour where the lost should come forth, and the grey company ride from the north. But dark is the path appointed for thee, the dead watch the road that leads to the sea. To Legolas she sent this word. Legolas Greenleaf, long under tree, in joy thou hast lived, beware of the sea. If thou hearest the cry of the gull on the shore, thy heart shall then rest in the forest no more. All right, let me pause here. I have a lot to talk about, and I see chat was moving here. So, were these nameless things failed creations of Morgoth, or simply dark creatures conjured by the discord and Eresong? Definitely the latter, because he said that they're older than Sauron, meaning that they were in the world before the Ainur came into it. Kind of like Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil was in the world before the Dark Lord came from the outside. Hey, Spielkopf, how's it going? So let's talk about this. There's a lot that I could comment on. What I'm going to comment on here is the words that he gives that were from Galadriel, that he gives to Aragorn and he gives to Legolas. Now, Aragorn, they're sort of laying the foundation already for the paths of the dead. But she's so foresighted that she knows that Aragorn, not only is he going to go to the paths of the dead, reunite with the Grey Company, but that he's going to be successful, and that he's going to come to the sea, and that Legolas is going to come with him. Now, she's not worried about anybody else. She's not worried about Elrond's sons. She's not worried about Halbarad. She's not worried about the rest of the Grey Company. She's not worried about Gimli. But she has a concern about Legolas specifically, saying, beware the sea. If you hear the cry of the gulls, your heart will not rest in the forest anymore. Now, he is a Sindar elf, which is one of the many forms of wood elves. They are Teleri, and they love kind of two things. The Teleri love forests and oceans. Now, the type of Teleri that love the oceans are what we call the Falmari, which translates as the wave folk, the sea elves. That's not the type that Legolas is. He is Sindar, which is gray elf, but even though he is Sindar by birth, culturally, he's Sylvan. He's a wood elf. Sylvan technically means a wood elf. There's also there's other types of wood elves. There's the green elves. There's the Nandor, for example. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that he is an elf of the wood. He has been to a few different places in Middle-earth now. He's been to water, he spent time floating down the Anduin in those boats, but he's never seen the sea. And I don't know how many of you guys in the chat can really relate to what I'm saying, but imagine that you grew up in a place like Colorado, You've seen lakes, you've seen rivers and streams, right? But there's a big, big difference if you were to travel to, say, California or New York and you were to see the ocean. It's so big and so vast. It's like, and this is where you really feel, wow, the earth really is mostly water. But for elves, what she's saying is if you ever see the ocean, you're not going to be the same. And she mentioned specifically the crying of gulls. And this is going back to some real First Age stuff. Now, the First Age, the elves awakened. And they awoke in a place called Cuiviénen. And they were already by water. There was a lake there. But, they wandered around for a really long time, And eventually, they were found by Oroma. And he gets the idea, man, we got to bring these guys over to the Undying Lands because we can't just let them wander around Middle-earth, and Morgoth could do whatever he wants with them. That's sick. So he gets 3 ambassadors.
He brings them to the Undying Lands. Then they come back to Middle-earth, and they tell their people, wow, it's so great there. You guys got to come with us. So most of them do. Many of them do not. There are some that just said, you know what? No. Pass. Those are the Avari. Avari technically means refusers. They refuse to leave Middle-earth. But then there is a bigger blanket term, Moraquendi. Moraquendi refers to any elf that did not wish to leave Middle-earth. Some of them started the journey, so they weren't Avari, and then they just decided to stay. A lot of them became the Sindar elves, and the Nandor, and the Sylvans, and all those guys. But what I'm getting at is a lot of the elves didn't get there. They stayed in Middle-earth. The Valar never felt that they should force the elves to come to the Undying Lands, that would be wrong. But however, there is a mechanism by which they made the elves want to come to the Undying Lands, and that's what's known as the Unquiet of Ulmo, or what Walter just said in the chat, the sea longing. And it has to do partially with seeing the ocean, but it also has to do with hearing birds. And even though it's the Unquiet of Ulmo, Manwë has a lot to do with this too, because Manwë has dominion over birds. And we see this with Tur, who is not an elf. He became an elf, but he started out as a mortal man, and he, had this love of swans and gulls, and he followed the swans and the gulls, and he was the first mortal man to see the ocean. He met Ulmo. He had the sea longing. He eventually sailed to the west, and he became immortal. And I have so much to talk about that I could do several streams just on Tur and the sea longing. But I want to mention here, it's really interesting that Galadriel is saying, hey, by the way, you're probably going to hear some and it's going to mess you up. And I want you to be prepared for that, And Legolas is, he's interesting because he does sail to the west eventually. But that's for later discussions. We're almost done with this chapter. Can we get another chapter in today? Let's see. I don't know. The King of the Golden Hole is not exactly the shortest chapter. We have paused to talk so many times. It's sort of like, there was 2 other times that we did only one chapter in a stream. That was the Council of Rohan, Council of Elrond, and the other one was Flight to the Ford, because Council of Elrond is just really, really long, and there's so many different characters involved that there's so much to talk about. And Flight to the Ford is not super long, but there's a lot of lore there, Almost top 1 for me. I think, and I don't know, you're not a member, so you haven't seen it yet, but when you see episode 119, one of the questions that I answer in that is, who's the most interesting Valar other than the ones that are the most commonly discussed? And I said, well, who are the ones that are the most commonly discussed? Manwë, Varda, Namo, Melkor, right? And then maybe you would Aule, right? Aule for sure. Maybe Yavanna. But I said, you know what? Whether you're asking me who's the most interesting one aside from those, or who's the most interesting one, period, my answer is Ulmo. I think he's the smartest. I think he's the wisest. I think he's the most interesting. And I think that he was one of only a few characters that really understood their job. It was him, Nienna, and Gandalf, and Tom Bombadil. I think everybody else went a little off mission at one point or another. Those were the characters that really understood their purpose and stuck to it, no matter what. Anyway, let's move on here. We do have to finish this chapter at least. I don't think we're going to get to the next chapter, but we're in no hurries, right? I mean, there's a lot of Thursdays and a lot of streams to do and a lot more books to do. Gandalf fell silent and shut his eyes. "And she sent me no message," said Gimli, and bent his head. "Dark are her words," said Legolas, "and little do they mean to those that receive them." "That is no comfort," said Gimli. "What then?" said Legolas. "Would you have her speak openly to you of your death?"
Yes, if she had naught else to say. What is that? Said Gandalf, opening his eyes. Yes, I think I can guess what her words may mean. Your pardon, Gimli, I was pondering the messages once again, but indeed she sent words to you, and neither dark nor sad. To Gimli, son of Gloin, she said, give his lady's greeting. Lock-bearer, wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee, but have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. It is happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf, cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. Come, come, he shouted, swinging his axe. Since Gandalf's head is now secret, let us find one that is right to cleave. That will not be far to seek, said Gandalf, rising from his seat. Come, we have spent all the time that is allowed to a meeting of parted friends. Now there is need of haste. Okay, let's comment on that. Like Gimli is one of my favorite characters. I love Gimli. I love how grim he could be, how serious he could be, how joyful he could be. He really shows all the ranges of emotions. He gets a little sad. He gets a little bummed out. She didn't say anything to me. And Legolas is like, hey, what she said to me and Aragorn was kind of messed up. Like, do you really want to hear that kind of thing? Like, you want to hear her, like, what, foretell your own death? And he's so in love that he says, yes. And it's almost, it's a Shakespearean sort of love. I know that, like, my friend Sid Kemp talked about the beginning of the Two Towers resembles, in a great way, the beginning of Beowulf. And there are certainly a lot of parallels between Theoden and Hrothgar and such. But and I told him, I said, it's interesting because I've always seen it a little bit more as Shakespearean, which is not as old of a text. But maybe Shakespeare was thinking of Beowulf at times. And I just love that he's saying, I just want to hear any message from Galadriel, even if it's, something bad. Anything. And so, he gets this like little message and he starts dancing and singing. He's just so happy. Hey, is she thinking of me? It's just kind of heartwarming in a way. He wrapped himself again in his old tattered cloak and led the way. Following him, they descended quickly from the high shelf and made their way back through the forest, down the banks of the Entwash. They spoke no more words until they stood again upon the grass beyond the eaves of Fangorn. There was no sign of their horses to be seen. They have not returned, said Legolas. It will be a weary walk. I shall not walk. Time presses, said Gandalf. Then lifting up his head, he gave a long whistle. So clear and piercing was the note that others stood amazed to hear such a sound come from those old bearded lips. 3 times he whistled, and then faint and far off it seemed to them that they heard the whinny of a horse borne up from the plain upon the eastern wind. They waited wondering. Before long there came the sound of hoofs. At first hardly more than a tremor of the ground, perceptible only to Aragorn as they lay upon the grass, and then growing steadily louder and clearer to a quick beat. There is more than one horse coming, said Aragorn. Certainly, said Gandalf. We are too great a burden for one. There are 3, said Legolas, gazing out over the plain. See how they run. There is Hasafel, and there is my friend Arad beside him. But there was another that strides ahead, a very great horse. I have not seen his like before. Nor will you again, said Gandalf. That is Shadowfax. He is the chief of the Meerus, lord of horses. Not even Theoden, king of Rohan, has ever looked on a better. Does he not shine like silver, and run as smoothly as a swift stream? He has come for me, the horse of the White Rider. We are going to battle together. Even as the old wizard spoke, the great horse came striding up the slope towards them. His coat was glistening, and his mane flowing in the wind of his speed. The 2 others followed, now far behind. As soon as Shadowfax saw Gandalf, he checked his pace and whinnied loudly. Then, trotting gently forward, he stooped his proud head and nuzzled his great nostrils against the old man's neck. Gandalf caressed him. It is a long way from Rivendell, my friend, he said. But you are wise and swift and come at need. Far let us ride now together, and part not in this world again. Let me pause here. I know I pause a lot, but we might as well, right? Oh, let me read what
you guys said first. Dwarves are a very Viking-esque race. Knowing when they die would be more mercy than saddening thought to dwarves. Perhaps. I mean, that is sort of what Gimli said here. Let's see what Walter said. To some dwarves, I should say, definitely not all dwarvendom would accept death easily. Yeah, definitely they're not a monolith. That's absolutely true. Right? And Deborah said, with elves loving only one person for all their lives, could this love have been placed on Gimli? Platonic perhaps, but singular, unless he finally finds his love in Valinor. Well, we have to keep in mind that when he does go to the West, he's 262 years old and very close to dying. And the only reason that he went was because he happened to say to Legolas that he wanted to see Galadriel one last time before he died. So I can't imagine that he lived there very long. Some dwarves live a very long time. Dwalin was like 340 when he died. But 250 is like sort of like the usual lifespan. It varies wildly. I mean, Durin was like, over 2,000 years old. I think that what we see here is it's not Platonic. Plato came up with the whole idea of basically the fact that you could be friends with somebody without, of the opposite sex and not have it be a romantic thing. And in this case, it is absolutely romantic love. It's what we would refer to as courtly love, where a man usually, or a dwarf in this case, loves a woman that is unobtainable for whatever reason. In this case, she's unobtainable for a few reasons. She's an elf, she's married, and she's, a little bit above his station. I mean, I guess they're both nobility. She's a little bit closer to royalty. She's the daughter of Finarfin. So usually it's like a love of a queen, or something like that. Courtly love, where you love a woman from afar in a very respectful manner. You don't get creepy about it. You defend her honor. It's absolutely romantic. It's not Platonic. By mortal, you mean fleshly, corporeal body, etc. Mortal beings are not meant to dwell in Valinor. So here's the thing. The idea of mortals in Valinor is sort of it's a complicated topic, and we don't have time for it to completely delve into it today. And I'm going to say it here, the Valar are at times very selfish. And the reason that they don't allow mortals to come to Valinor, really to the Undying Lands in general. Remember, Valinor is one country in a big continent called the Undying Lands, or Aemon. Oh, you meant between Gimli and Legolas. Oh, well, they're best of friends, of course. Absolutely, they love each other, and it's not a romantic love, but yes, absolutely, that would be Platonic. Absolutely, 100%. I thought you meant Gimli and the Galadriel. Okay, let's talk though about the whole day very briefly, because we don't have time to get into the real deep lore here. But the real reason that mortals are not allowed to be in the Undying Lands is because mortals die, and the Valar want to be in a place where there's no death, and that's really all it goes to. You know what I mean? Oh no, it's okay. You're not stretching time. I mean, we have another 20 minutes, and I still have like a page to read and stuff to talk about. So don't worry about it. We don't have time to get into all of the whole mortals in Valinor. Here's the thing. So they go to this land. It's the only part of the world that Morgoth hasn't messed up, and Morgoth's essence is not in the land there. So they go there. And they say, this land will be untouched by death. And how do you do that, right? Okay, obviously, they don't die. They invite the elves don't die, right? Even if they're killed, right? They still really don't die. They make all the plants immortal. They make all the animals immortal. Everything there is immortal. But they don't have the ability or the authority to make mortals immortal. Mortal men, the children of Iluvatar. They can do it for like pigs and horses, but they can't do it for dwarves or men or hobbits or giants. They just can't. They don't have the authority. They don't have the ability. They can
change their lifespans. We know that because they did it once and it was a disaster. That's why Aragorn is in the prime of his life at 89 years old at this point, because they gave extra life to mortal men, and they gave them a land that was just close enough to the Undying Lands where you can see it on a clear day. Talking, of course, about Numenor, right? And they told them, don't ever come here. We'll come visit you. The elves will come visit you. You're not allowed to visit the elves, which is really silly. They even said, can't we just go to visit? I get why you say we can't live there. I mean, I don't really, but I'll go with that. But why can't we visit? And like I said, it's a little bit of selfishness. It's a little bit of selfishness. They don't want anything to die around them because it bums them out. It makes them sad. And, you know, obviously they bent the rules a few times. I mean, Tuor went there, and Iluvatar stepped in and said, well, I'm going to make this guy immortal. He's an elf now. Eärendil and Elwing went there, and Manwë even told them, you can stay. I know you're mortals, but you can stay. But you got to choose one or the other. They chose immortality, even though that's not what Eärendil wanted. Eärendil didn't want to be immortal. He wanted to be immortal. But as soon as Elwing said she wanted to be immortal, he's like, I got to be with her. He didn't want to be separated from her. So they would have allowed that. They would have allowed mortals there. So they bend the rules a few times when they want to. You know what I mean? Shelob's mother in Valinor. Ungoliant, yes. Not in Valinor. And she was in the Undying. Remember, it's the Undying Lands, and Valinor is just one part of it. There's Eldamar, there's Erisea, and there's a lot of uncharted wilderness. Now, you're talking about Ungoliant. She did leave. She went across the Helcaraxa with Morgoth. After they destroyed the two trees, they both went to Middle-earth, and then she was driven off by the Balrogs, and she went into the south and eventually kind of vanished, and the elves sort of have this legend that she probably just ate herself somehow, and that's how she died. But she definitely made it with a lot of these spirits that came up out of the earth, and they took the form of spiders. So yeah, she was there. There's danger there too. But keep in mind that she wasn't a product of Morgoth. She was something else. She was just something that had joined with him at one point and then decided she wanted no part of it. Because she wished to be what Tolkien described as the mistress of her own lust, which basically is his way of saying she was girl bossing and she didn't want him, telling her what to do. And that's what it came down to. And evil is never cooperative. That's an important theme that we have to remember. Ungoliant is evil. Morgoth is evil. That doesn't mean they get along. And she was an incredibly intelligent being that knew that the relationship between them was always going to be one of them is the master and the other is the slave. So she went along with what he wanted her to do because he scared her a little. But he also promised her a whole lot. And of course he's a liar, He's a liar. He didn't give her what was promised. So what does she do? She turns on him. She attacks him. And the only thing that got her off of him were all the Balrogs, So, and the Balrogs, right? Do they love Morgoth? Are they like, do they look at him and they're like, Dad? No, it's not like that. They're his slaves, That's the only relationship that exists between evil creatures because they're not cooperative with each other. So when I say, like, Morgoth never messed up the Undying Lands, that doesn't mean that it was all good. As I said, because Ungoliant was there, and she was hiding. The Valar, they didn't know she was there. They knew there was something weird going on in the southern part of Aemon, but she was able to create unlight, which is why I like to call her the walking black hole. She was able to create something that wasn't just darkness, it was unlight. Because if you think, what is darkness? Darkness is just where there's no light. She was able to create something that's the opposite of light, that even Manwë couldn't see through. Which, by the way, I'm gonna bring this back to an earlier thing. Who said it? Let's see. Hold on. I have to scroll up here. Somebody said something that I got to call back to here. Walter. Okay, I'm going to call back to something that Walter said. So,
we have this thought, like, it's all, stuff that Tolkien wrote, obviously, but we have this thought, the conceit of the author, he didn't write it, he just translated it. Dude named Elfwine came from the Undying Lands, brought him a book, he translated it, right? So, Bilbo wrote The Hobbit, Frodo wrote The Lord of the Rings, the elves wrote the Silmarillion, and then Bilbo translated it, yada, 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 right? So then we start to think, well, who wrote which parts, and how do they know these things, right? There were certain parts where, there are no elves present. Who witnessed Fingolfin ride across that ashy wasteland and then go to Angband and battle Morgoth? There were no other elves present to sing that song, right? And the answer comes in the form of, well, who bears Fingolfin's body away? Is Thorondor, the Eagles. So they go and they tell Manwë. Manwë tells the elves. It winds up in their chronicles. Boom, right? But how do we know about the stuff between Morgoth and Ungoliant? Now maybe an eagle saw them in Middle-earth at Lambeth, right? But the conversation between them, where she was hidden away from even Manwë, how does anybody know about that? That Morgoth came to this crevice, there she lived, and she had taken the form of a spider at this point, and that he threatened to bring the whole thing down around her if she didn't come out and talk to him, and that she comes out and they have a conversation, and then they go and they destroy the 2 trees. Who recorded that in universe? And I think Walter knows, because it's Ulmo. Ulmo is interesting. He's the most interesting of all of the Valar, because he's present wherever there's water. So she's able to shield herself from Manwë. She's not able to shield herself from Ulmo. And what does Ulmo do? He goes and he tells Tuor all this stuff, because they said when he came to... Here, let's see. Hold on. I'm going to whip it out here. The Fall of Gondolin. And we want to go to the back of it here. Okay, not that. That's the list of... That's the index. All right, let's see. There's a version that I want to go to. Is it this one? That's the conclusion. No. And I think I need the table of contents here to find the exact page that I want. All right, 145. Okay, the last version. Here we are. Ulmo body cams in open water. Yeah. Literally every drop of water is his eyes and ears. His body cam. That's one way of putting it. Let's see. This is like my favorite writing that he's ever done. It's just a shame he never finished this version of The Fall of Gondolin. Okay, that's right after this. All right. Where does it say? Let's see. You know what? I'll just read the whole section to you guys since we have time. Arise, Tuor, son of Hur. Fear not my wrath. The long I have called to thee unheard, and setting out at last thou hast tarried on thy journey hither. In the spring thou shouldst have stood here, but now a fell winter cometh soon from the land of the enemy. Haste thou must learn, and the pleasant road that I designed for thee must be changed. For my counsels have been scorned, and a great evil creeps upon the valley of Sirion, and already a host of foes is come between thee and thy goal. What then is thy goal, Lord? Said Tuor. That which thy heart ever sought, answered Ulmo, to find Turgon and look upon the hidden city. For thou art arrayed thus to be my messenger, even in the arms which long ago I decreed for thee. Yet now thou must under shadow pass through peril. Wrap thyself therefore in this cloak, and cast it never aside until thou come to thy journey's end. Then it seemed to Tuor that Ulmo parted his grey mantle, and cast to him a lappe. As it fell about him, it were a great cloak wherein he might wrap himself over all from head to foot. Thus thou shalt walk under my shadow, said Ulmo, but tarry no more, for in the lands of Einar and in the fires of Melkor it will not endure. Wilt thou take up my errand? I will, Lord, said Tur. Then I will set words in thy mouth to say unto Turgon, said Ulmo, but first I will teach thee, and some things thou shalt hear, which no man else hath heard, nay, not even the mighty among the Eldar. And Ulmo spoke to Tur of Valinor and its darkening, and the exile of the Noldor, and the doom of Mandos, and the hiding of the Blessed Realm. So, basically, what we're learning there is... And then Ulmo gave him the plot of the Silmarillion, the Ainulindali, the Valaquenta, and the early parts of Quenta Silmarillion up until that point. He's like, let me just catch you up. Y'all don't know. Some weird stuff happened. And he tells him everything. The darkening of Valinor, that's to do with Ungoliant, you know. So basically, that's how the lore came to the elves, I think, right there. All the stuff that they didn't know. Just like, you know, Frodo wrote The Lord of the Rings. How does he know everything that Gandalf said to Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas? Because one of them told him, probably Gimli. You know? Yeah. None of the Valar are really all that concerned with mortal men. Except for Nienna. Nienna is somewhat concerned with them. In a very different way. Because she sent them Gandalf. I mean, obviously, yes, Manwë was the one that chose Gandalf. Who's the one that taught him all the things that he then... By the way, let me just say, out of all the reading streams that I've done so far, you know, we've done 4 for The Hobbit, 10 for The Fellowship of the Ring, and this is the 3rd one for The Two Towers. This is the most fun I've had in one of these, all right? And a lot of it is the back and forth with the chat and everything, but also just getting to whip out the Fall of Gondolin and read that part. It's one of my favorite parts of the entire, you know, kit and caboodle here. All right, but let's finish the chapter here, and then we'll talk more. I have a playlist, Jonathan. If you go to my playlists, you can see all of them there. Sometimes you'll see ones that are not available unless you're a member. They'll eventually be available to everybody. I have to make membership somewhat attractive to people. Members get to see things early. And by the way, consider membership. If you really like what I'm doing here, and I do put a lot of time and effort and, yes, even money into this, so consider it. It's $5 a month. It doesn't cost you anything, and you get to see everything early. If you don't make it to a stream, you can see it the very next day instead of, you know, waiting a few weeks. All right, but let me finish this chapter here. Soon the other horses came up and stood quietly by. Oh, wait, pause. I stopped and I got distracted. All right, so a lot of people ask me, what happens to Shadowfax at the end of The Lord of the Rings, right? Does he go to the Undying Lands with Gandalf? I think he does. And there's 2 reasons. One is that at the end of The Lord of the Rings, the focal point at that point is Sam, and Sam does mention that Gandalf has a giant gray horse. And what does Shadowfax look like? He's a giant gray horse. It doesn't say that it's Shadowfax, but what other horse is he going to take? But he says something really interesting here to Shadowfax. Far let us ride now together, and part not in this world again. He's basically saying, we're going to be together in this world from now on. Can we really think that he would say that to Shadowfax and then leave him in Middle-earth? There's no way, right? Impossible. Could he really do that? Gandalf had also himself a love for the mortal children of Era that the other 4 chosen Istari did not have, but yes, it was done to... Yeah, I think that obviously Gandalf was the one that was the man of the people, so to speak. You know, Saruman had a love of devices, and Radagast had a love of creatures. And the other 2, you know, they were different. You know, They had a very important part to play, but it was not what Gandalf did. Gandalf did it the right way. All right. I'm sorry, I had to back up and say that. Absolutely, Shadowfax goes to the Undying Lands with Gandalf. 100%, no doubt in my mind. Not that Grey Horse mentioned in the chapter, the Grey Havens, that's Shadowfax. There's no way that I can believe that he would say, let us part not again in this world, and then he would just be like, hey, I've got to go home. I'm leaving you here. No way. All right. Soon the other horses came up and stood quietly by as if awaiting orders. We go at once to Medicil, the hall of your master, Theoden, said Gandalf, addressing them gravely. They bowed their heads. Time presses, so with your leave, my friends, we will ride. We beg you to use all the speed that you can. Hasafel shall bear Aragorn and Arod Legolas. I will set Gimli before me, and by this leave Shadowfax shall bear us both. We will wait now only to drink a little. Now I understand a part of last night's riddle, said Legolas as he sprang lightly upon Arod's back. Whether they fled at first in fear or not, our horses met Shadowfax, their chieftain, and greeted him with joy. Did you know that he was at hand, Gandalf? Yes, I knew, said the wizard. I bent my thought upon him, bidding him to make haste, for yesterday he was far away in the south of this land. Swiftly may he bear me back again. Gandalf spoke now to Shadowfax, and the horse set off at a good pace, yet not beyond the measure of the others. After a little while he turned suddenly, and choosing a place where the banks were lower, he waded the river, and then led them away due south into a flat land, treeless and wide. The wind went like grey waves through the endless miles of grass. There was no sign of road or track, but Shadowfax did not stray or falter. He is steering a straight course now for the halls of Theoden under the slopes of the White Mountains, said Gandalf. It will be quicker so. The ground is firmer in the Estermet, where the chief northward track lies across the river, but Shadowfax knows the way through every fen and hollow. For many hours they rode on through the meads and riverlands. Often the grass was so high that it reached above the knees of the riders, and their steeds seemed to be swimming in a grey-green sea. They came upon many hidden pools and broad acres of sedge, waving above wet and treacherous bogs, but Shadowfax found the way, and the other horses followed in his swath. Slowly the sun fell from the sky down into the west, looking out over the great plain. Far away the riders saw it for a moment like a red fire sinking into the grass. Low upon the edge of sight, shoulders of the mountains glinted red upon either side. A smoke seemed to rise up and darken the sun's disk to the hue of blood, as if it had kindled the grass as it passed down from the rim of earth. There lies the gap of Rohan, said Gandalf. It is now almost due west of us. That way lies Isengard. I see a great smoke, said Legolas. What may that be? Battle and war, said Gandalf. Ride on. And that is the end of that chapter. So yeah, it took me 3 hours to get through a single chapter, but that's... I mean, I just want to point out, this is how much we got through right here, this little bit between my two fingers. And that's kind of the point. I mean, if I was just reading the book to you guys, we would get through a lot more, and I would get in trouble, because you can't do that with copyrighted works. It has to be educational. And, I had the idea of doing this quite a while ago. I thought of, doing some sort of reading sort of stream, even before I had started the Tolkien stream, before the Tolkien channel. I had thought of doing that. And then when I started my channel, I had the thought of, man, I would love to just do the readings, but I can't, and I looked into, you're supposed to get permission. How do I go about doing that? And I looked into it, and essentially I learned that the Tolkien estate will give permission to readings, but not over the internet. It would have to be in a library or something, and there's very specific rules that you'd have to follow, but you could never broadcast it. So eventually it sort of dawned upon me, but wait, there is something called fair use, and one of the ways that you can claim fair use and use a copyrighted work is through education and making it educational. So that's why we stop so often to discuss everything, You feel like the blue wizards had love for hunting, similar to the Vala Orma, hunting darkness in the east, like Orma did in the deeps of time. Now, that actually plays into, and I always, when we're over here, hold on, let me come over here for a moment. So, over there is usually where Matt is, right? He's not there right now, but that's where Matt would be during the Council of Tolkien. And sometimes he starts getting into this mode where he talks about how big something is, or how long something is, or how heavy something is, right? And I say, there goes Matt with his yardstick. He's brought out the measuring tape. And some people are like, "Why, you don't like Matt?" No, I love Matt. He's great. I'm making fun of him the way that Legolas makes fun of Gimli. But and I said, and Matt could always say to me, "Well, there goes John with his dictionary, right?" Because he brings everything into this like practical side, and I bring it, and Sid brings everything into a spiritual side, and I like to bring everything into a linguistic side. So when we talk about the blue wizards, one of them, they have several names, but one of them is called Morenitar. And Morenitar means, thank you, CW Train, Slayer of Darkness. So I think that you're right, that they just have sort of maybe almost like a battle lust, or at least Morenitar did, right? And he was definitely the leader, because it's not just Slayer of Darkness, but Tar also indicates a leader, Tar meaning Lord or King. Well, it means king, really. Lord is here, right? Like Hirgan, Gwei here, stuff like that. Elro here is another one that has here in it. That's Lord. Even Horse Lord, Rohirrim. You see that a lot. So we get. Oh, hold on one second. Yes. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So we have a few different names for them, but his name, his original name was Alatar, so that's where the tar comes from. And then the other guy was Palando, and they were, Alatar was one of the ones that was actually chosen to be a wizard, because when Manwë came up with this whole idea, he said, "Oh, well, okay." He was the one that volunteered, really. He said, "All right, who's going to do this?" And Alatar is like, "Hey." He was one of the first to along with Saruman, who was called, he had a few different names. Saruman was originally called either Tarandor or Kurumo. And they both basically mean the same sort of thing, which is, a man of skill, But, and then you say, okay, so you have two volunteers. Where did the other guys come from? Well, Alatar says, "Hey, can I bring a friend?" And that's where Palando comes in. And then along comes Aloran, and that's Gandalf. And Manwë says, "You're going." And he's like, "Wait a minute. No, please. I'm weak. I'm afraid." And Manwë says, "That's why you're going." And then the last was, Yavanna shows up and says, "Hey, this guy's going too." And that's where Radagast comes from. And she specifically wanted Radagast to be Saruman's, his companion, which Saruman was not, he was not fond of that idea. He didn't want a companion. He certainly felt put upon to have that sort of, person foisted upon him, Yeah, he didn't want to go. He was scared, but he felt he's weak and Sauron is strong, and but that was sort of the point, And even now we see, like I said, he says he's the most dangerous thing that Gimli could possibly run into unless he was brought before Sauron himself. But he still has his humility. He says, "I am Gandalf the White, but black is mightier still."
Is that saying that if it came down to Sauron and Gandalf slugging it out, that Sauron would win? I would say no. That doesn't mean that. As a good amount of lore that would tell us that Sauron would be very afraid of a direct battle like that. Because every time he gets into a direct battle, it goes really kind of badly for him. The only time he really had a good one was with Finrod. So, that didn't, that worked out well for him, but most of the other ones, not so much. He usually loses his battles or they come to a draw. So that's why he has, an army to do it for him. So it wouldn't come down to that anyway, because Sauron's he's a bit cowardly. He wouldn't, he wouldn't do battle. But that being said, when Gandalf says black is mightier still, he's not saying Sauron is more powerful than I am. What he's saying is that it's not just Sauron. It's me against all of Mordor and Isengard. And I can't do it alone. I'm not supposed to do it alone. I'm here to lead, to teach, to inspire, and that's what he does. That's what Gandalf does. He leads, he teaches, he inspires, he makes friends, and he makes his friends become friends with each other. He's, like I said, there's only a few characters that really stayed on target, and it's Gandalf, Nienna, Alma, and Tom Bombadil. Or perhaps unsung heroes slain in the East. I mean, Tolkien had two different ideas for what happened to them. An earlier idea about the Blue Wizards was that they went out into the East and they sort of just lost themselves and became cult leaders, and they created sort of cults of magic. And then another idea that he had was that they were actually working behind enemy lines to create rebellions among Sauron's people and to sort of inspire people that were, under his yoke to rise up against him and not follow him. And the idea was because, while this war in the south is happening with Gondor and Rohan and Isengard and Mordor, there's another war happening in the north where the Easterlings are coming into Middle-earth and they're fighting the dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale. And Dane dies and King Bran dies, King Brand. I wonder who else came up with that. But anyway, the idea was that if not for the Blue Wizards, that the Easterlings would have completely overrun Middle-earth, But my thought is that both of those things could be true. They could just be true at different points in time. They did that, and then they started cults of magic. That's a thought. It's not like, I'm not saying it's like canon or anything. I want to distance myself, by the way, from any sort of idea of the word canon being meaningful in any way in Tolkien discussions, because I would like to view Tolkien discussions as something more akin to, here's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's a very, very old tale, one of them that he translated, and it's part of a big mythology, usually referred to as the Arthurian legend. The proper term for it is really the Matter of Britain, which is basically British myth. And the Arthurian legend, it doesn't have canon, it just has classics. Anybody could tell a story about Merlin. Anybody could tell a story about Gawain. Anybody could tell a story about Arthur, and they're all equally valid. It's just, here's the ones we really like, Yeah. Yeah, and keep in mind that Sauron is a Maiar himself. A Maya, rather, that's the singular. But yeah, no, you're right, because, he lost already to Elendil and Gil-galad. Okay, so Aragorn's not as mighty as Elendil. And Imrahil is not as mighty as Gil-galad was. But then there's Gandalf. And there's also the fact that Sauron's a whole lot weaker, too. You know what I mean? He's gotten beaten.
a lot of times, and each time it hurts them. So yeah, I think that, like, if we think of it as there's not a canon, there's just classics. Like, we all agree that the Peter Jackson movies are really good. They don't agree with the books and a lot of things. So I always say that's not Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. That's Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. It's its own separate thing, you know? Anyway, that's okay. I understood anyway. I kind of figured it was a typo. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye for tonight. Let me go over the schedule. For those of you who are watching me here on Twitch, we stream every day. We have gaming streams every day. So just to tell you, the next few days, tomorrow afternoon, we will be playing Final Fantasy for the After Years. Saturday night, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Sunday night, Mega Man X, actually. Monday afternoon, Street Fighter 5. You guys know the schedule. If you're on my Discord, you know my schedule. For those of you who are watching me on YouTube, no stream next Thursday. But in 2 weeks, August the 7th, we will be live again with Matt and with Sid doing the Council of Tolkien. It will be a regular episode where we go back to our regular format. We will be deviating from format from time to time. But, yeah. And then in another week after that, on the 14th, we'll be back here reading The Two Towers. And then on the 21st... we'll continue the video game version of The Fellowship of the Ring, which, by the way, sticks to the book really well. I mean, there's a few deviations because it's a video game, but I liked seeing Tom Bombadil and everything, so that's been pretty cool. Anyway, guys, for those of you on YouTube, the stream is going to end. For those of you on Twitch, we are going to raid somebody. So let me see where we're going to head. Where are we going, guys? Twitch audience, who are we going to raid? Let's find out. YouTube audience, I love you guys. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Of course, there'll be videos between then and now. Who am I rating? Let's see. I think... Oh, I didn't mean to click. I didn't mean to click on you. I think... Oh, wow, Liv's on. We haven't seen Liv in like a while. All right, I'm going to raid Liv Phoenix. She's playing Resident Evil. Not sure which version. I think that's GameCube or something. I don't know. We'll raid her. I haven't seen Liv in a while. I almost thought she stopped streaming. I'll give you guys a raid call. A very dumb raid call. Foolish, as Gandalf would say. Okay. Okay, guys. For those of you on Twitch, copy what I put in the chat. Paste it into Liv's chat when we head over there. I will see you guys tomorrow. For those of you on YouTube, you guys know there's videos coming out all the time. And of course, you could always just come by and say hi to me whenever you want, and I'll see you for another live stream in 2 weeks with Matt.